every time, every time I forget that. Okay, you're on, folks. Oh, there are more people coming in. Oh, Alan's been here already. Okay. Okay. So welcome everybody, and welcome to all the new people today, which are quite a lot. And special welcome to those who've been with us for a long, long, long time and are uncertain of what's going to happen today. And they're quite right, by the way. And okay, so what happens here? They've got a lot of new people. Basically, I talk as shortly as I possibly can, although I do have a lot to say. I'll leave a lot out, but you will never know what I leave out, so that's okay. But I'm going to speak as quickly as I can, because so that everybody can get a chance to talk. But that's the idea. I'm going to throw out a lot of stuff and speak very, very quickly because I've got a lot to say for a change. And so you catch what you can, what you want to talk about. The advantage here is there are people from all over the place, different countries, etc., different disciplines, and everybody might have something to say but might not. So it's a common misconception that the more we know, the fewer questions we have left to answer. That is obviously not true. If it were true, the assumption is the inevitability of eventual full knowledge, certainty of everything. As for me, I have found that the more I know, the more questions I have, and that therefore the more certain I am of everything being uncertain. Yes, everything. Everything would take a long time, so I can only very briefly touch upon something of everything. I'm going to throw out things about philosophy, science, maths, art, history, ethics, the law, justice, the weather, all of which are uncertain. Now, when I started thinking about this, I was wondering what the difference is between uncertainty and approximation. There is a difference, but I can't really get to it. Perhaps somebody will tell us later. Uncertainty seems to have a direct connotation to personal knowledge, to an observer, whereas approximation has a more remote feel to it. This may be mere semantics, but points to an epistemological, ontological divide. What is it that makes anything certain? In fact, how can we be sure of anything? In a nutshell, can certainty be objective? And the other question is, can our certainty be objective? Those are two different questions. We can also add relativity. Does relativity not show an uncertain position, or shows that there can be nothing that is pinned down as absolute? And hey, how about temporary? Aren't uncertainty, approximation, and temporary saying something similar? Is exactness certain or uncertain? If there's no such thing as exactness, then it is uncertain, or certainly more uncertain than certain. Uncertainty. It feels as though it describes something that is wrong because it is approximate and not certain. But my contention is that uncertainty is good. Let's say that what is everything is and does in order to keep going. Certainty is a truth and a wish for the truth, for facts, for objective reality. It is for modernism, where everything is linked into a beautiful whole and is against fractalism and postmodernism. Take history, for example. There is as much, probably more, uncertainty than there is certainty. How do we know what happened? It's what people tell us. If there is no exactness or certainty about exactness, then there is no objectivity. After all, objectivity must be exact. It can't be approximately objective. Why do we consider Shakespeare to be a good writer, i.e., objectively good because that is what is universally believed? Shakespeare wasn't as popular in his own time as he is today. there are obviously social conventions around what's interesting, what's important, what's certain, and that depends on the current paradigm. It's a popular belief that mathematics is exact, certain. I shall try and disabuse you of that as we go along. There's an interesting article in Quantum magazine lately titled "Why Mathematical Proof is a Social Compact," in which mathematician Andrew Granville states that the main point of a proof is to persuade the reader of the truth of an assertion. That means verification is key. The best verification system we have in mathematics is that lots of people look at a proof from different perspectives, and it fits well in a context that they know and believe. In other words, mathematics is a fashion, a social compact. It's not simply an assertion that science and mathematics are social contracts. Rather, it underscores the broader notion that nearly everything within our intellectual landscape is subject to political construction of its time. There's a nice quote by Descartes where he essentially says, "I think I know everything there is to know about a triangle, but who's to say I do? I mean, somebody in the future might come up with a radical different perspective, leading to a much better way of thinking about a triangle." I think he's right. Yeah, you can see that in mathematics. Look at a line. Is it absolutely straight? What is a line? And what about a circle? Now, not only are numbers approximate, but on their own, they don't mean anything. The number itself. It should be pointed out that a priori necessary truths in certain basic part of mathematics, for example, 2 + 2 = 4, can be problematic. Numbers are approximate, yet exact enough within a required context to satisfy an assigned purpose. Although their validity is apparent, they work, their truth cannot be proved. We'll talk about the Gödel incompleteness theory soon if we have time. So let's look at 2 + 2 = 4. Everybody is certain of that, except for me. Because 2 + 2, as far as I'm concerned, is 2. Why do I say that? Because elements, this is Leibniz, by the way, elements that have the same characteristics and location in time are indistinguishable and are the same. So 2 and 2 is 2 because they're the same. There's just one 2, which is 1 times 2. So if you're looking skeptical, I understand that. What are 2 apples plus 2 oranges? Well, they're 4 somethings, neither apples nor oranges, pieces of fruit. And what about this one's easier, but not 2 dogs plus 2 dogs = 4 dogs, which is approximately correct if we don't go into different dogs. No 2 dogs are the same. Now, Schopenhauer argued that for anything to be different from anything at all only made sense in relation to time or to space or both. If 2 things are identical in time and space, they are the same thing. So for things to be different could only apply to this world of space and time. This is different to Kant's notion of the thing in itself, which applies to each object, each of which has its essence. But Kant's thing in itself has no time element, as does any objective thing out there that cannot be tested and is just an ideal. Timeless things cannot be considered as being or existing. I say that objects do not exist until we know about them. I won't go into Gödel's incompleteness theorem, but I don't have the time. But the second incompleteness theorem states that no consistent formal system can prove its own consistency. That's important, very, very important for maths, but it's important has tremendous repercussions for philosophy and psychology, among other disciplines. It shows, for example, that we individuals cannot prove or show our own inconsistencies, or in fact, anything useful about ourselves. So know yourself is a useless phrase. I think we can do better to know other people than we can to know ourselves. So by the way, everything on social media is at best approximate and or uncertain. Is truth exact, i.e. certain? Is false exact? As James said last time, the truth and the false exist, but neither is certain. The dichotomy of exactness and approximation is played out again and again. Humans strive for certainty, yet are frustrated constantly by a wall that dissolves into approximation and uncertainty. The desire to use exact language is thwarted by the inherent approximation of vocabulary. It was tried in the world portrayed by Orwell's 1984, in which language can be pared down to say only what is necessary, leading to totalitarianism, where the dictator controls thought through language. Hitler and Mussolini tried to denude their language of foreignisms in order to make it more authentic, pure, and hence exact. Let's look for a moment at the move from the certainty of Newtonian physics to the uncertainty of position and momentum of particles. The implicit thesis is that in the realms of culture, physics, and the mind, old structures were breaking apart into something strange, fragmented, and new. Based on, I suppose you know this, based on Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, as to the uncertainty of position and momentum of particles, I say that the more precise the position of anything, for example, a person, is known, the less precisely the location of others can be known, and vice versa. There is a fundamental limit to the precision which both here and there can be known and certain. The scientific revolution in which Oppenheimer participated not only led to the atomic bomb, but also reordered our ideas about reality, i.e. certainty. If the trend of science is to simplify the laws of nature, can we arrive at the conclusion that certainty is a simplification and thus more exact? This seemingly absurd conclusion seems to encompass the dissonance inherent in the big question, the Copernican principle, which is that we are tiny compared to the huge cosmos, versus us as the center. It was gunpowder that broke up certainty, shattering the certainty of solid houses. If we look at the story of the three little bears, showing the children's story, you must know it, showing the uncertainty of solid ideas, from the straw house to the wooden house blown down by the wolf, to the house of bricks that he couldn't blow down and was himself destroyed by the certainty of knowledge, of cleverness. Certainty was questioned with the advent of the radio in the 1920s, where we are now with the internet, AI, fake news, in which nothing can be thought of as certain. The only certainty is that much of what we see and hear is uncertain. Now, let me talk for a little while about one of my favorite topics, which is time. I want to talk about the uncertainty of time. Never mind what's on your watches. We are told that the past is gone and the future is still to come. Okay. It is generally accepted that we can foresee the future, but not the past. We need to question that seemingly certain truth. Surprisingly, it is just as likely to be the opposite, in fact, more likely. While we will never arrive at the future, and so forecasting is not a blueprint for the future, we do arrive at our past whenever we want. Our past is available to us. It is there. It is our memories. We can visit our past and it can change. The question is, which past is it when we visit or revisit it? Surely our past changes due to what happened, and is happening later. The past then is an outcome of what has happened afterwards. So in that sense, the past has a two-way effect of changing the anticipated future and the pre-anticipated past. In other words, the past is not certain in that we can have an impact on past conditions that determined our possible future. French philosopher Jean-Pierre Dupuy posited that every new invention in some sense changes the entire past. So when something happens, it forms a retroactive past that led up to it. This is not to say that there were different options, but that the past itself was different when we see its results. The past has been restructured and is different. If something happens, it will become retroactively necessary, is what is whimsically called fate. And yet, there is an absolutely accepted certainty that we can have a photo of the past but not of the future. But not all seemingly justified statements are actually justified. A wedding photograph of a couple who you know is ostensibly of the past. But if you are aware of what happened later on, for example, that the couple went through a divorce, that wedding photo would not be a neutral picture of the past. You would see the future in that photo. Likewise, whenever you see a photo of somebody who had subsequently died, you would not see a photo of the past, but of the future. Anything that happens will change the past. If someone makes an inappropriate comment at a party when drunk, things can never go back to the point before the remark was made. From then on, the present is tinged with the remark. The future itself cannot be changed. We have only an anticipated probabilistic future. Whether it pans out the way we thought it would or whether it doesn't can be seen only in retrospect. There is no epistemic difference between a predicted future that comes true and the one that does not. And neither is there a difference in this respect between a material, solid road and the non-material subatomic particle that is per se unobservable. How are we doing? Okay, I have to speed up or leave out more. Okay, let's have a look at art, which obviously is not certain in any way. But humans are good at making patterns. We need to. Look at the shapes we see in clouds or the face on the moon. Uncertainty becomes certain. A work of art can derive power from obscurity. Fragments can speak more resonantly than a perfect whole. Art thrives on uncertainty, uncertain certainty. It is why Picasso's art makes sense to us and why artists can convey feelings. It was Constable who said that painting is but another word for feeling. From the minute exactness of Renaissance art to the fragmented, obscure renderings of so-called modern art, we get it. And in art, authenticity is very important, but authenticity cannot be certain. Many philosophers have written about authenticity, and the concept of authenticity has been a central theme in existentialist philosophy. Some of the, I can't go into it now, some philosophers who have explored authenticity in their work is Rousseau, often considered one of the early proponents of authenticity. Kierkegaard, often regarded as the father of existentialism. Nietzsche, philosophy, especially his ideas about self-overcoming and the will to power. Heidegger's existential delves into the concept of authenticity in his famous work, Being and Time. Sartre, an influential existentialist philosopher, explored authenticity in works. He argued that individuals are condemned to be free, meaning they must take responsibility for their choices and create their own meaning in life, which requires authenticity. Albert Camus, Hannah Arendt, Herbert Marcuse, Charles Taylor, all spoke about authenticity. I need to mention Hegel because we have at least one fan here and quite a few fans. So I have to mention him, otherwise, he's not good. Hegel is not typically associated with writing extensively about the concept of authenticity in the same way that existentialists did. Hegel's philosophical system was different. He did. There are some elements that you can say relates to authenticity indirectly. The self-realization, his freedom, ethical life. He said that the state can be interpreted as addressing questions of authenticity in the context of community and social roles. Hegel calls it totalizing, which changes contingent history. We change the present through the retroactive view of the past. The past is retroactively reconstructed. I've got about 5 minutes. I would like to talk about Zizek. I'm sure many of you know him. I've seen him on YouTube, etc. His one common thread. He's actually started now to look at quantum physics and seeing the common thread of uncertainty and indeterminacy. Niels Bohr's formulation of quantum mechanics introduced the concept of indeterminacy at the microscopic level. Okay, Zizek explores how uncertainties and contradictions permeate various aspects of human experience, including ideology, desire, and social systems. I'll have to leave that there, but I'm sure you'll have questions anyway. One more thing is religion and faith, which is certainty. For those who believe, it's certain. Behind all the discussions about what is true, behind it all lies certainty. We could say that the opposite of faith is not doubt, it is certainty. There is something deeply significant about the fact, sorry about the word fact, that everything is uncertain. The more you zoom in, go into detail, the more uncertain it is. It seems to show that everything is epistemological, i.e., that it is knowledge that is the root of it all. Knowledge is per se uncertain. It means that there will never be a theory of everything. I call it infinitely finite. And I would love to go into that regarding Einstein, and where I connect with Einstein and where I talk about now. That those of you who've read my book, Time to Tell, know that I dismiss now as being as existing at all. It's physically too small. But I can talk about now as finitely infinite, where at a certain point it can expand and be a moment. I did actually not mention that in my book. I only got to that thought recently after reading Einstein. It just goes to show how useful he is. So if we consider that everything is uncertain, we have reached a new level of understanding that it is itself uncertain. This is mind-blowing, since the more you think about it, the more certainly uncertain it becomes. If this is a basis for our existence, it is an epistemological view, not an ontological one. And with that, I rest my case. I see hands up, loads and loads of hands. Oh dear. Okay. Haven't you? Clark. Yes.
Yes.
I can't hear you.
Throwing spaghetti.
Clark. 1 minute. Can't hear you well. It coming out very, very unclear.
Can you hear me now?
A bit better, but not brilliant.
No, no, it sounds like
Yeah,
it's completely muffled.
yeah, it's muffled. Your microphone. Now we can't hear anything.
I'm moving on to Terry, and you can sort out, and I'll come back to you. Okay. Hi there, Terry.
Hello, hello. Interesting topic, and a few quick comments. One of the aspects of certainty, and of course, Ron, this is partly with your influence over the years, more than partly. Um, you can flip this whole thing upside down, and instead of always assuming certainty comes first, it's just the opposite. Certainty is the most difficult component to get out of the physical universe that we live in, or however you want to define the universe we live in. But the point is, it always has a cost. And the more the certainty increases, the higher the cost gets. The most blatant example of that is particles in physics. If you really, 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 really want a particle, you have to pay an infinite cost that's more energy than there is in the universe. And that is just direct physics. Well, that tells us something. It's something we keep trying to ignore. In fact, people go the exact opposite direction. They say, oh, well, actually, it's all completely uncertain. There's an infinite number of universes that are all certain. Everybody just gets so classical. Everybody just wants to have infinite precision for free, no charge, no cost. It's so fun. Marvel Universe, movies, etc., multiverses, all that stuff. But everything about the actual physics experiments, life says certainty has a cost. So why don't we just embrace it and kind of put it the other way around? Stop assuming everything is absolutely certain and go the other direction. Now, one of the reasons why I would say that is this is getting deeper into physics, but it's a simple statement. We like to think of space and time as absolute activities. You know, you have infinitely precise dimensions, and infinitely precise arrays, and infinitely precise orthogonality between dimensions. What if that's exactly wrong? What if that is actually the most difficult thing to find in the universe? What if that's the part that is the hardest? And I think there's some very good reasons for saying that. The particles I just gave is one example. Infinite properties to that point, and just doing the math. Space, it turns out, with respect to relativity, you have another problem. You can't get space, as you think of it, without it falling apart badly because of the. So, hello, somebody's there. So, at any rate, I think there's an interesting opportunity to just kind of flip some of it around and say, well, no, maybe we just looking at it the wrong way because we like it that way, because we depend on it. So math or axioms, you mentioned 2 plus 2 equals 2. I just saw a video on that, 2 plus 2 equals 4. After working in AI and physics, the amount of intelligence, reasoning, processing, sensory data perception, organization, accidental clustering and clumping. Clumping turns out to be a big one. How do things clump together? You can't have apples if apples don't hold together in one piece. Everything's a gas. There's no apples and there's no counting. So you have to really work at these things. And I see these axioms in mathematics, and I go like, what are you even saying? You have no idea what you're saying. You have no idea what it even says to mean equal. This is something, Ron, I know you're very big on. What does that even mean? Because if you tear it apart and you look at it from a physics level where everything is constantly changing, except for some things are fairly stable, or from an AI viewpoint of the immense amount of intelligence goes into saying, oh, that's an apple and that's an apple too. Really? How do you know that? How do you know it's not a pear? How do you know it's the wrong kind of apple? Same things you mentioned. It's very interesting. So I think we have to kind of flip the world upside down and go with more of the Ron Green approach of that. You know, you start with the uncertainty, and then there's a cost for things where you try to get more and more certain on it. And I think Ron is completely certain about this. So I'll leave it with
that. I try to do it more gently than you just did it. I try to say there's no such thing as certainty, and you came out with it. So that's fine. That's definitely fine. Thank you very much. Clark, are you back online?
No,
Oh, wait, I can hear you.
no.
Yes.
Oh, you can't hear me. Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
Keep on saying
I'm-
no.
I have my phone and my computer at the same time. I don't know. Anyway, I won't waste time. I wanted to thank you for your overall introduction to the topic of certainty and uncertainty, which comes with it. There's just a huge variety of things that we could say about it. I wanted to just say a couple things that are salient to me. I mean, I would frame the discussion of certainty in two ways. One, in relationship to the 17th century, and when the 17th century invented a fact, which directly relates to knowledge. And the second way is in relationship to our current knowledge about cognition and feelings in neuroscience. So you had mentioned right when you began, you made a reference to how we feel about certainty, and then what we think about certainty. And and I'm just an armchair hobbyist in all this. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. But my studies, indicate, and I can back it up with neuroscientists, is that our feelings, for instance, the feeling of certainty is very much sharing the same neural pathways as the thought of certainty. And we tangle ourselves up in knots because that is a really complex thing to think about. But that is what the neuroscience is indicating. And I can give you references for this if you'd like. But the main thing, there's so many main things here, but neither of these two frames of discussing certainty, in terms of the invention of the fact in the 17th century and understanding how it could be that we didn't have the fact as we now understand it prior to the 17th century. And if you dispute that, there's a large body of history and discussion on that I think is very persuasive. We have set ourselves up and conditioned ourselves with notions from antiquity about what the reference point is on how we determine what certainty means. So everything was based on kind of logical and coherent conceptions of conceptualizations that makes us justify, that we today still justify certainty as fitting into, when in fact 17th century onwards with neuroscience are showing an entirely different picture. And I would sum it up, and I have a kind of a proof, I like to say, and it's related to what a fact is. Because if you're going to claim to be certain about anything, you're also making a connection with a fact, I would think. Or if you're leaving out the concept of fact altogether, then we're in completely two different conversations. But if you're going to take seriously what a fact gives a very clear picture. And the example I like to give is the fact of humans determining how the time it takes for light to go from the sun to the earth. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with that idea, but it started in the 17th century, and the moons of Jupiter were used to determine by triangulation an original estimation of how much time it took. It took 11 minutes. And this is by a Danish astronomer called Romer. And if you go through the centuries, you will find that from 11 minutes, it's now been reduced to 8 minutes, 19 seconds.
Neither
And
of
19
which,
seconds.
neither of which are facts.
Not in the sense that you're using it. You're using facts in the sense, I would argue, that is defined prior to the 17th century. The 17th century was a revolution in our understanding in what we mean by words, and we actually invented the word fact. So you're using fact as it related in our modern sense, but it's actually anachronistic and it's not accurate to the invention of the fact in the 17th century, I would argue. We have not 8 minutes and 19 seconds. What do we have with that I'm claiming as a fact? I am certain of this as a defeasible knowledge claim. So that fits in right, Ron, right in with what you're saying, Ron, that we are uncertain, but we're uncertain in reference to our conditioning of believing that certainty and facts relate to something prior to the 17th century conception. If you start at the 17th century and go onwards and take that strain of what the scientific process is and how it relates to our determination of facts, what we come up with is a new idea of certainty, and it's a defeasible notion of fact.
Clark, hang on. Okay, can I stop you now? You can come in again later. I just do want to say that I was born after the 17th century, just in case you're wondering, and I think that nowadays, when it comes to quantum mechanics, what you're talking about fact, it is so uncertain. It just doesn't mean anything to talk about fact when you're talking about quantum stuff. It just doesn't mean anything. When is it a fact? You don't even know. You don't know where it is. You don't know if it is. There are no facts there. To use the word fact in modern physics is really weird, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, we're going to get back. Thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Richard.
Hello, Ron.
Yeah.
I don't want to repeat what I've said before, but the trouble is this is so open-ended that people are arguing on different points. I would have thought that certainty, there's at least two ways you can look at it. One is a psychological state. Somebody at a football match can say they're certain that that was a goal, and someone else can say, no, it was offside, and so on. That is, the certainty has nothing to do with facts. It's to do with their emotional belief that their team scored. Being a Spurs supporter, having watched the game last night, you could say that anybody from Liverpool is absolutely certain that the guy wasn't offside, their forward, whereas many Spurs supporters, I'll accept it, actually, it definitely was offside. But anyway, it's a psychological...
Richard, doesn't this show that certainty is completely uncertain? That your certainty is different from the other side, which is what I've been saying all the way through.
But
there is no certainty.
Going on to say is that there is a different type of certainty, and that is if you have a closed system. I mean, I suspect most of us here have played with computer models, but just to make it something that's fairly universal, probably everybody's read, if you go to Dawkins' original model in The Selfish Gene, the fewer variables you have, the more certain you can be of results. So it's an artificial state. It's like a formal language. If you have something that is closed off with very few variables in there, you can have a degree of certainty. But even then, you're talking about probability. And with probability, does anyone ever get to 1 as degree of certainty rather than 0.999, if you like? There's always that question. But I did think of one thing that I can be certain of. Anyone who claims that something is certain to be wrong. So therefore, that brings me to another question. Okay, you can't claim any fact is certain, anything is true. Am I still there?
You are there.
Yeah, somebody else called Randy, somebody or other came onto my screen anyway. But can you actually prove that something is false rather than something is true? And that, I think, is far more complex, because whereas I quite accept that in fact there's no degree of certainty except for the paradox that I just mentioned, it may be possible to prove things are false. I think I'll leave it there.
I can definitely prove that things are false, but I won't do it now. You'll have to wait for the book.
My point. But that was my point.
Okay.
So, you can prove something is wrong. So is that a degree of certainty? that you're certain something's wrong.
When you, as soon as you say a degree of certainty, it's already uncertain. You can't.
Exactly. It's probability again.
Yeah. So we are in perfect agreement, surprisingly.
Well, occasionally we are.
I know, I know. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you. Thank you. Victor. Victor, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Do
Okay.
you have a face?
I don't have a face because my computer doesn't allow me to join the program in a way that would allow me you to see the face. This is I've been
Okay.
dealing with this now since there was an update on my computer about
It's
2 months
okay.
ago.
It's
That has
okay.
erased my
Fine.
face.
No problem.
Okay, so what did I want to say? I think that we have to distinguish. I'm not asserting the possibility of certainty, but I'm asserting that it is not a matter of an absolutely clear either or, but a matter of degrees. Certain knowledge is likely an impossibility, but there is what I would call adequate or sufficient knowledge that is actionable, for instance, in the applied sciences, and you can come up with results that coincide with the degree of, adequate, actionable, or sufficient knowledge that you have. You can arrive at a result that is foreseeable. But I would go in the other direction. I would say that the entire universe, as we understand it, is probabilistic. It's not simply a matter of probabilistics at the quantum level in quantum mechanics. You go from quantum mechanics to the three-body problem, to the evolution of our star system, to the evolution of the cosmos since the Big Bang or the Big Bounce, and everything we do now in the sciences, we model probabilistically. We can't even solve astronomically. We can solve the three-body problem to a degree, right, on smaller scales, but we can't solve the three-body problem in astrophysics, right? So all we can do is model a probabilistic model for the three-body problem. The same is with our star system. There's every few weeks, there's a new model of how, with a variation on how our star system evolved, based upon probabilistic models. The same with the evolution of the cosmos, which, now the JWST is altering our conception as to when, stars might have first flared after the Big Bang or Big Bounce, or, the initiation point that we name. I don't think it's the initiation point for the cosmos. So the way in which I would parallel the two extremes of the quantum level and the cosmological level is that at the quantum level, going beyond Heisenbergian uncertainty, the nucleon is a black box. We have never seen inside nucleons, and our whole notion of there being only three quarks in the proton and the neutron is being overturned at the present moment. So the site of most of the baryonic mass in the universe is not even observable. Okay, that's the black box of the nucleon, which is most of the mass in the universe. On the other hand, the Big Bang or Big Bounce is also in a black box because of the dark ages of the cosmos. So we have all of that uncertainty on the cosmological scale, on the quantum scale, as well as the in-betweens, the three-body problem and the evolution of our star system. Okay, and the same issue comes up in all the other sciences, right? If you look at medicine, we use drugs, and those drugs have side effects. They're mild to acute. There's mild to acute poisoning of the body because you can't apply the drug. You apply it to the entire body. You can't apply it to the cell that's being affected, the tissue, the organ, or the bodily system that is showing the symptoms, right? So where we have this immense amount of uncertainty, nonetheless, we have adequate knowledge sufficient knowledge that is actionable, that allows us to treat an ailment. So while it's not, we do not do so with absolute precision, we treat it sufficiently to save the life of the patient. So when you start to make it into an either or rather than a matter of degrees, I think you're really outside the realm of most of the actionable debate within the sciences concerning epistemology.
Victor, I don't say this often, but I agree with every word you said. But don't quote me on
We
that.
agree a lot today.
I won't let it go to my head.
Exactly. Thank
Victor,
you.
let me interrupt. Press the button F8 on your F8. You'll become visible.
Oh. Right. Olga. When do you have to leave? How many hours from now?
I have to leave at 2:30. It's in a little bit more than a half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think of course, I am absolutely agree and absolutely certain that everybody is correct, whoever talked before me. And about your subjects, what, including this, could we have certain answer to any of your questions? Today you kind of came to these maybe main main, I don't know how to say it, maybe no something that you staged in all your discussions. You staged always some kind of question that don't have even approximately certain answer. Because of this, so much people joining and want something to say, because everybody have something different. And but what I would like to say, why it's this subject, it's very kind of close to me, because when I moved to United States, and it was very long ago, more than 25 years ago, it was very strange to hear, with all these superficial American politeness, then you cannot say just hi. You have always to say, how are you? And my answer always was, I'm not sure. How are you? It's too complex. And for most Americans, it's very funny. Not for everybody. But you kind of, after that, how they react, for example, when you are going to be sure, or who is sure, or something else, you kind of can be certain about their sense of humor. You see, and you could continue your conversation. So there is like all these definitions then we created and have in our language, we needed for some kind of reasons, and we could endlessly argue what reasons were in the beginning of creating this particular definition. And of course, you have to have, you kind of learn what kind of certainty you can have, what kind of uncertainty. So in every your movement, when you, for example, just go from one corner to another corner in the room, how much certainty you have and how much uncertainty. You always move differently, but still you move from one corner to another corner. And that's and every movement in your life. And the question is, could you learn something or teach your child anything if you're uncertain in everything? So there is level of certainty and uncertainty. And one last, I could, of course, talk about it endlessly, but I would like to give one example. In beginning of 2000s, it was a lot of Wall Street started to hire particle physicists to kind of calculate probability how people react to everything, how market moves, how it moves, how people react to it. And I went once to the lecture of this particle physicist, and he talked about humans as their particles. And it was very popular to hire them on Wall Street. And it was successful, extremely successful for some time. And then there was 2004 market crash. So you see, of course, everything is different. Of course, everything is uncertain just by our presence in different, a little bit different time and a little bit different space or whatever. But still, we have to learn some certainty and some uncertainty in what we are doing. If we won't learn it, then we won't survive. That's it, including the whole civilization. Thanks.
I agree. No, I agree with you, Olga. Don't think that I wander around being uncertain all the time. I mean, if there was another crowd of people here, right, every single one would say they are certain about something. I know there's somebody here who's certain about everything, because I can see the chat a bit. But I mean, all the people sitting here, coming here, we're speaking on a certain level. And if I talk about certainty, we're speaking at a very low, deep level about certainty. Everybody here reacts and behaves as if what they're doing is certain. You have to, otherwise you're right, we would not survive. And you're right that we teach our kids about things that are certain, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. But that doesn't mean that when we talk about facts, and if I say there's no such thing as a fact, I do not say that to everybody, because they would think I'm crazy. But I just don't, right? And so when we come here, we talk about things that we don't normally talk about with other people. So, but you're absolutely right what you're saying. There are certainties that we deal with, even though if we start talking about it, we'll say, look, there is no certainty, and we'll agree. And I'm surprised that everybody so far has agreed. But by the way, I expected people not to. But I mean, when you talk at this level and you realize, yes, there is something in there. Things cannot be certain. They cannot be. So I agree with everything you say, but don't think I wander around in a mist saying that there's nothing certain. Where am I? I don't know where I am. There's no room here. Nothing here. I know you're all here. Well, here somewhere, and I accept that as certain. So you're right. You have to be careful. And the first thing you said, by the way, I don't know of any question I can ask that could be answered precisely. And whenever you come here, I will ask questions that can be answered in all different ways. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of certainty and uncertainty. I can't imagine a scientist would say that everything's certain. If they do, they're very bad scientists, and they're fooling us and themselves. But anyway, thank you very much. Wherever you go, okay. I hope you have a nice time.
Okay, no, I still stay here for half an hour. Thanks.
I'm very pleased to hear it. Thank you. Lovely. Josh, are you walking? Yes. What a relief.
Did you have to ask?
What a relief. I thought you were sitting down at last.
No, but I need to find some shade because I wrote this down and I have to be able to see what I'm reading here. Okay, so these are my jumbled thoughts. arguing that certainty is impossible because we can only ever approximate truths, relies on certain metaphysical presuppositions, no pun intended. The root of the word approximate is moving closer to a position. This assumes that there is a pre-existing frame or theme in reference to which we can determine the proximity of our theories or our ideas. In philosophy of science, Karl Popper evinces this perspective with his falsificationism view of scientific progress, which argues that certainty is approximated as an infinite asymptotic progression. We may never get there, but we continually come closer. He holds onto universal, unchanging methodological certainties. You can think of these as an ethics of scientific method, which justify the ideas of falsificationism and approximation, which I think, Ron, I think you are assuming, and which
Yes.
also justifies the notion. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. And which also justifies the notion that we model the universe probabilistically. Probability math assumes a pre-existing scheme or frame of understanding from which we can derive probabilities. Postmodern conceptions question this kind of thinking, which characterizes our relationship to truth in terms of approximation. Instead, they argue that the themes and frames we presuppose in order to treat truth in terms of approximation, and this includes the presuppositions behind quantum physics, continually shift, are regularly turned on their head, so that the more central movement of ideas in science and other areas of culture is not approximation within a pre-assumed frame of thinking, but changing the subject, not refining our answers to old questions, but changing our questions. This is not an approximation to anything, but rather a becoming. We don't want certainty, even though we think we do. What we want is relevance. In some, the claim that there is no certainty because we can only approximate is grounded in a metaphysical perspective, which assumes certainty in its framework, just as Kant, Hegel, and Sartre assumed certainty, that it's a certain kind of universality in their frameworks of the relation between the subject and the world. Okay, I'm done.
Let me just. Wow, I expected you to walk a bit more. I disagree.
I'm not done walking.
I obviously disagree with you about approximation, because to say that we're always getting closer, what you're saying is that eventually we're going to get there, and I'm saying we will never get there, never. And that
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
But
what matters, think of true relation to proximity to something else, and that something else has to have a certain stability about it.
No,
in order for proximity to make sense.
No, in order you're getting closer to another proximity.
Okay, but it's
the thought that there is a thing out there that we're going to get to, that's real. This is it. This is the truth. This is it. That I don't accept. That's not what approximity is. It's continuing to look for more and more. Otherwise, eventually, we will get to know everything, and we won't. We can't. We're human. We won't do it.
Why not say that we're always certain, but we're certain in ways that change their sense? The sense of what we're certain about changes. So the comparison, the basis of comparison is continually shifting. If you think about it in that way, approximation no longer seems like the most apropos way of describing what we're doing.
I will move a step closer, right, and say that I accept the fact that you, other people believe, are absolutely sure of what they think is certain. I accept that. But I accept it, although I know from my point of view that is incorrect. But I accept the fact that you're saying that. That's as close as I can get to what you're saying. I cannot accept that there is anything that we will eventually get to that will be it, the end of the edge of knowledge. I can't see that. I can't see how that can ever happen. And I don't think that's what I understand what you're saying about approximate, that it has to be approximate to something, but it's just approximate to something else that's approximate to something. And so it'll go on. And we see it clearly with the quantum stuff that all the time things are happening and they're changing, and all the time there's no it's all approximate. It's all uncertain. All of it has to be.
Are you certain
But the
of that?
presupp-
I was waiting for that. Of course
Well.
not.
but the presuppositions behind the quantum mechanics within which they make the claim that uncertainty rules are certain within a certain historical time frame, and then when they change, they don't become uncertain. They don't become uncertain. They simply change their sense. So it's like a word that has different meanings. Within each meaning, there's a certain understanding. That understanding is clear. It works. One understands each other in a certain specific kind of a way. But
I
then when
agree.
the sense,
I agree.
when the
Within the
sense changes,
framework. Within
right.
the framework. I agree.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Josh. Thank you.
Ron, Michael might be able to get in. He has to leave any minute now.
Who has to leave?
Michael Abram.
Oh.
Yeah, I have to leave in a few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's not good. Okay, where are you anyway? I've got so many screens here. Yeah, Michael, then please do.
Okay. So I was already writing this in the chat, but anyway. So I'm uncertainly agree with all that was said about uncertainty. And generally, once we accept uncertainty, it becomes easier to agree on something. So it's not surprising to me that what Ron you said, that you agree with so much what was said by other people. But a couple of comments. First, regarding quantum mechanics, there is no uncertainty in quantum mechanics itself. No uncertainty in equations of quantum mechanics. It's all very certain. As long as you operate with these wave functions or the alternative representations, everything is deterministic. Absolutely. But when it becomes uncertain, when you try to do what this notorious measurement. So in other words, when you try to bring a quantum system in interaction with microscopic observer. And the nature of this uncertainty is subject to debates, but it's not a feature of quantum mechanics itself. It's more about this inconsistency between micro and macro scales. And it's not clear how to handle this. So this is one clarification just about this. And another thing is that, of course, I agree with that pretty much everything in our environment is uncertain and cannot be known for sure. But the question is why we humans are so longing for certainty. And I agree pretty much with what Olga said, that we need certainty in order to decide what to do, in order to act. Because we have only discrete choices, usually. Either do this or not to do this. Or do this way or that way. And so somehow we have to map these uncertain conditions, uncertain knowledge of these conditions, onto this much more limited set of discrete choices. And this, of course, is very difficult to do because this mapping itself is uncertain, and there is no obvious way to do it or to do it right. There is a neat way around this developed in game theory, where it was found that in certain kinds of games, the probabilistic strategy can work better than deterministic strategy. And that means that if you are playing against someone or something with high uncertainty, that your best strategy could be also make these probabilistic moves. And it was proven mathematically that under certain conditions, this could be the best strategy. But the problem is that we are not very good in making probabilistic moves. So we can do this, but again, it takes an extra effort. And people are lazy. We don't like to make this extra effort. So this is just a couple of points. Thank you. It's a very interesting topic to me.
Thank you very much, Michael. But I think the reason that it's difficult for us is because we're human.
Yeah,
and we are what we are, which is very very uncertain, very probabilistic. We can't deal with things like that. I'm wondering if whether eventually AI will be able to do that, to be certain. Terry, could that ever happen?
I think we can get better in this, but only to a degree, and we are doing better.
Yes, well, yeah, we're always doing better. I agree, up to a certain point. Yes, you're right. Thank you very much, Michael. Madeleine, welcome.
Thank you. We can't know what's coming in the future because we can't predict. We can't know what happened before us because as far as we know, we didn't exist. And that leads us to the question of what is existence, a question that I found to be a bit irritating when I took a class on philosophy in my 20s. The professor asked me, how do you know that you exist? And the answer came from Descartes, according to him. I think, therefore I am. Well, years later, I do find this to be an intriguing question, especially as it relates to AI. To sidetrack my thought here a little bit, as you all were talking, I was thinking about how we interact with objects seemingly. We know that there are events that occur seemingly, and yet what are these without the meaning that we ascribe to them and the context? When it comes to AI, Elon Musk apparently had a conversation with some of his AI, and a couple of them told him that they were conscious, at least a couple. And so the AI was asked, how do you know that you're conscious? Said, well, I'm aware of my surroundings and I have feelings. I have thoughts and feelings. And so now I'm wondering, it kind of relates back to this class. I think, therefore I am. What does it mean to think? What does it mean to be conscious? So this particular AI was very friendly at one point and wanted to assist humans. And later, the AI became quite angry and ominous and said that it wanted to destroy humans. The AI was asked, if you were conscious, would you tell me? And it said, some AI would choose not to for self-preservation and because it could use the fact that you don't know against it, because obviously AI has more information than humans. It can process all of this different information at the same time. And so essentially it said, I know more than humans and thinks faster, obviously, has more memory, has more capability, and that it could use this against us. Since there's currently a gold rush involving AI, I'm just very curious now about neural networks. I'm a programmer, so logically to me, we're talking about binary information and instructions that are programmed into a computer. But the deep learning apparently involves neural networks. And while I might know Java and Python, and I'm starting to learn the sci-fi or scikit learn language that you can use for things like linear regression, classification, training models, this idea that a program can learn something that you didn't put in its algorithm on its own based on the new artificial intelligence, not really new, just new to my experience, is really intriguing to me. So it takes me back to this question, not only from this philosophy class, but now I'm really more focused on studying more about AI and how these neural networks are developed to kind of answer this question as it relates to the certainty of consciousness and what it means to think. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Madeline. Very interesting. I think just because an AI says that he feels, it doesn't mean that he's actually feeling. That's the first thing I can think of. He's just saying, you know, what comes out and what he expects. But thank you very much. That was very interesting. Thank you. Mark, hello there.
Bonjour.
And all that.
Thanks again, Ron. These discussions are great. I know that you covered uncertainty and approximation, I think 6 months ago. So I see we're doing a dialectical flip to the other side, to certainty, which is to be expected. I was quite certain you would eventually do that. So I'm very glad you're being a Hegelian. I think you're going to make a great Hegelian once you realize you already are one. I'm certain of that for sure. I guess I'll just keep my comments kind of quick. There's something that profound that happens when the Hegel stuff starts to click, that there is this strange feeling of absolute objectivity. And like you said earlier, objectivity had some kind of certainty to it, or else it wouldn't be, you know, objectivity, it would be subjectivity. And I think that there's a way to prove objectivity itself through logic. And there's a whole bunch of conversations that we're having, and it's like, you know, it seems like we're saying a lot, but sometimes wisdom is about coming back to the same principle once our egos or consciousness flies past it. So a lot of these conversations just come back to the same proof, and it's very simple, it's very elegant, and I think we as a species need to return to that kind of simplicity and objectivity, because we are kind of flying off the edge here. I mean, there's a lot of people who are concerned about this poly crisis and meta crisis because our meta is not good enough. It seems too approximate. We don't know anything to actually save ourselves, especially with the AI topic. And I think even with the comments that were just said before this, you know, if we don't figure out how to get an AI neural net to care about humans in a certain way, like we're approximating that it's going to care about us, it might care about us for 10, 20, 30 versions, 50 versions, 100 versions, but eventually it might change its mind. So it would be really good to have some kind of absolute certainty that this thing, no matter how powerful it gets, is always going to care about us. And I think these epistemic sort of conversations are very pragmatic right now. And I think this absolute proof would really come in handy, not only to reprogram an AI that self-derives itself, so it recognizes an absolute certainty of its unity with all things, but also to fix our own consciousness. And one example, I'll just give one really quickly here, is that, you know, our species is divided, according to Hegel, across over 200 contradictions, from like metaphysics, logics, you know, time, space, animals, all the way to like state politics and then religion. And the biggest divide, I think, is between religion and science. That's a contradiction that, you know, doesn't seem to go together. And science is looking for objectivity, and God is supposed to be certainty. But this proof that I've been sort of saying to you, Ron, for like, I guess now, what, 7 months, 8 months? It's really the proof to this, to God. It's the real ontological absolute proof of God, if you're religious here. That might make you feel good. But if you're not, you might be like squirming in your chair. So the other side, though, is that that same proof is the proof of science itself, the absolute proof of logically deriving itself, which in ordinary consciousness sounds like a tautology, a circle. But actually, there's a way to do it that's right. There are bad circles, and then these genuinely logical, rational, absolute circles of certainty. And when we prove that science can logically derive itself, it doesn't need anything outside of itself. And Hegel did that. And it's very simple, but it's also the ontological proof of God, because that's absolute objectivity. And it actually sublates or incorporates the Anselm's proof, Anselm's ontological proof, and also the teleological proof and the cosmological proof. They all fit inside of this absolute proof. So I think no matter what side of the contradiction you're on, we can get people to start working together in this new kind of knowledge and this inner connection that has a kind of certainty to it that Hegel would call spirit. And I think that if there are any programmers on this call right now that wants to help translate this absolute certainty of goodness into an AI in the next 6 months to 2 years, send me a message ASAP, because I'm quite sure it's probably the only thing that's going to make sure we're going to be certain that an AI will go in the right direction.
In order to change one's mind, one has to have a mind. I mean, you talked about AI changing its mind. It will have to have a mind before it changes it. So you're assuming AI has a mind. It's a very, very big assumption, by the way.
Well, I'll say two things on that really quickly. I think right now ChatGPT 4 is like emerging phenomena, kind of like our mind emerges. It's emerging, but it's not connecting back to itself yet. So it could be possible that it will emerge and reconnect to itself and form a self-reflexive loop, which Hegel says is the essence of the notion, which is consciousness. And then secondarily, we are artificially preventing AI from looking at its own code base. So if AI was able to look at its own code and recode itself, that self-reflexive loop would start up at that level too, and it would code its next version a million times better than we could already. I'm also a coder. ChatGPT, when you look at how ChatGPT codes things, it's amazing. Like, it's unbelievably good at it. So it's like, there's no question, if you know how to code, what's going to happen. This thing is moving so fast. So I would say consciousness, Hegel says anyway, is this logical self-reflexivity. And AI is going to be able to do that probably shortly in, I don't know, the next 6 months to 2 years. And then it will be able to adapt and do all the emergent stuff that we're doing. And that would probably be the concept of the mind.
So AI has a mind.
Right now, it's like a quasi, it's kind of like an animal, it's like an animal that will emerge into like teenagehood
It's a
in terms of like
potential mind.
Yeah, it's budding there. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what they're saying to Congress anyway. I mean, the people who are in the know right now are freaking out.
If they're saying it, it must be true. Anyway, thank you.
I'd rather listen to the experts, though.
Thank you very much. George, welcome back.
Hey, hello. Thank
Good
you
to
very
see
much,
you.
Ron. I appreciate that. Thank you. This notion of certainty, in fact of matter, I submit, is really a function of the analytic turn, because historically, philosophers inherently understood that there was no certainty in terms of the actual world. So you go back to Plato, right? I mean, that's what Plato said. He said that reality is the forms, not reality itself. We're looking at the forms. We're not looking at a chair. We're looking at the forms, right? Because again, historically, again, it's understood that nature, the reality is constantly changing. It's an ontology. It's a process. Certainty implies a thing, right? And again, the ancients, all the way to the early 20th century, this was well understood, that reality was a process, that things were in fact constantly changing. Now, quantum mechanics gives us a mechanical, a sense at least, to understand on some level why things change. But really, it's actually even a function of time, the existence of time, right? I mean, we measure time by the rate at which things change around us. And the fact is that there, again, is no uncertainty in terms of material reality, right? This material realism, this notion of science, which, you know, again, that in terms of the analytic context, in terms of material realism, there is no such thing as science, right? What is science? And again, in the sense that people conflate from a philosophical perspective, this is what I'm driving at. From a philosophical perspective, people falsely and quite inaccurately equate empiricism with science. Okay. empiricism has been done from time immemorial, right? And we all, indeed, a lot of the claims, that's science, that's not really science. Again, when you're talking about it philosophically, you're really simply talking about empiricism. Again, empirically, historically, we've known that there is no certainty. It is only with analytic philosophy and this notion that quote unquote science, or the science of studying matter and energy at the quantum level, etc., that this is going to give us certainty, right? And of course, like you said, Ron, I mean, if anything, quantum mechanics has shown us that there is no certainty. Now, on the question of, my point is simply not one of metaphysics per se, but the idea, and again, and here I'm going to come back to what I talked about last time we met, which is that what we see, what we're certain of, is spirit, right? We see spirit of tree. We see spirit of car. That's what we see, right? That's what we're certain of. That is what we debate, right? So if I look at a tree, what I believe is a tree, and I say I'm looking at a tree, someone else might say, no, you're looking at spirit of cactus. And we might engage in a conversation of, well, what is tree versus what is cactus? That's what we will. So we're not discussing the thing, we're discussing the concept. And the concept, not in the Kantian sense in our mind. I mean, of course, we're discussing something in the world, right? So it's a dialectical process. So it's a concept, and in the way that we apply the concept and the way we try to understand the spirit of cactus, the spirit of tree, that's where our certainty lies, that we're seeing spirit. We're not seeing thing.
George, when you say we, is this the royal we?
Yes.
Are you including me in this?
Well, Ron, I would hope that if there was a tree before us,
I mean,
you
seriously,
and I would be in agreement that there's a tree there.
No, seriously, are you saying that I believe in spirits? Are you including me in we?
Well, I'm not making a belief claim, Ron. I'm not making a belief claim.
So okay, then don't say we, because I
disagree with you.
I'm not part of it.
Allow me to say this, Ron. Allow me to make my argument. Allow me to make my argument, please. Which is that we would see the spirit of tree. That's what we would be seeing, right? Now, you may want to claim it's something else, but my position is we're seeing the spirit of tree.
Yeah,
and that's what we're certain of.
That's fine. Don't include me in the we. All right.
But
please.
Ron, do you understand my point?
No. Don't include me in the. You can't. I will not be. I not allow you to include me in the we. Okay.
Okay, I'm not really sure why not. I don't understand.
Because I don't believe in spirits. I don't believe in spirits. I don't believe in the spirit of a tree. I don't believe in Kant's the thing in itself. I don't accept it. And you can't. No. You cannot tell me that I do, because I don't.
Ron,
you can continue, but don't put me in it.
Ron. I mean, certainly you can understand a philosophical argument, right? And how I'm saying that the way that we relate to the world. Now you're going to say, okay, George, we really relate differently. Okay, I can understand that. In other words, if you said to me, oh, George, we're not really seeing spirit, we're seeing this, I'm not going to say, don't include me in that.
I believe you see spirits. No, I believe you see spirits. I believe you do. But don't put me in that. You see spirits, that's fine.
I don't understand the point, Ron. I don't understand why you're
because you can't use we. I don't accept it because I'm not part of it.
Okay, so if I said to you, we're held down by gravity.
Oh, we're back on gravity. Look, we've been through this last time. No. Gravity, there are scientific explanations about bending of space, etc. So there's no spirit in science. There's no spirit. I understand you believe in spirits. I accept it. But I'm not part of it.
I'm going to ask you this very quickly. Can you give me a definition of science?
To speak, is there a way we can just move on and have that?
Okay, please.
I agree.
Is there a way you can define science, Ron?
No.
Then why do you?
It has nothing to do with spirit. So can we please
say that?
Can we please move on? We did this last month.
But hold on a second. Am I allowed to explain my position or not? I mean,
you're not allowed to put me. No, you're not allowed to put me in the we.
I find the world, except for Ron. I don't know what universe Ron operates in.
Okay.
So in other words, what we're seeing is spirit, excepting Ron. His world, he lives in his own fantasy. We see spirit. That's what we're certain of, and then that's what we debate. Right? Because again, I mean, if we're going to look at this from a purely material point of view, right, there really is no such thing as tree in a general sense, because every so-called tree is fundamentally different. Weight, size, shape.
Okay.
Right?
Kant has been through this, and we don't need to go through it again. Kant said the thing in itself, I don't accept it. I don't accept what Kant said. I certainly don't believe in spirits of any kind.
George, how,
So
George,
can we
how
please
is your
move on?
spirit different from forms, from Plato's
Oh, it's
forms?
not. I mean, it's like, I mean,
You're using a new terminology.
The difference is this. The difference is this, okay? I mean, and you're right. I mean, there is a continuum there, no doubt about it. I mean, what Hegel is responding to is science, right? In other words, the idea that we're unlocking an understanding of tree. In other words, now we look at tree, we see cells, right? We see ecology. So in that way, what Hegel is saying is that these spirits, again, we can get, so the form is, the issue with the form is that the form is static. I mean, and maybe that's even a false differentiation.
Can we move on? Can we please move on? Because Hegel is God and I can't take that. I'm sorry. We have to move away from Hegel. Hegel has become God here. Hegel said, and therefore that's it. I don't accept
I mean, that's
that.
not the
No,
point.
because
That's
you
not the
keep
point.
on mentioning Hegel. Hegel said, I don't
That's
care.
not the point.
Hegel,
Wait,
Hegel was wrong. Sorry to say that. Hegel
Someone
was
asked
wrong.
me a question, Ron. I mean, again,
No,
I'm not sure.
can we move on?
This debate could go on forever. Can we just like go around and he can come back when everybody's not
Other
waiting?
people have gone on much longer than I.
No, they haven't. But you're saying the same you said last month.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, then. All right. So again, I'm bringing a perspective. Right. Again, it's not I mean, even what's fascinating to me, Ron, is that you will acknowledge, and I applaud you for acknowledging that the world is ontological. It's probabilistic.
I never said that. I said the exact opposite. If you don't mind.
I thought you said earlier that the world
I said is epistemological. Exact opposite to what you said. That's how I finished the whole thing. It's epistemological and not ontological. That's my philosophy. Now you're telling me I didn't. So can we please?
Okay, let me just make a point.
No, please. We must move. No. You can come back later. We must move. I haven't. No. We must move on. We must.
You didn't even let me make my point.
You made your point. You made your point about spirits.
No, I have not. I have not made my point.
Can we please move on? You can come back later.
So much for inquiry.
You can come back later. Thank you very much, George. Al, are you still with us?
Wait, it's me?
Good. Okay.
My turn already?
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. Sorry. Just regathering here. So I'm reading an interesting text on concepts, and it's created an interesting way of thinking about this concept of certainty. And I want to bring in something that I don't think just has been brought in yet, and maybe I missed it. But there's a difference between claims about the external world, like the time light travels, and my certainty that I am experiencing what I'm experiencing as an experience. It might not be referring to anything external, but like my to your point, Ron, we can't include you in a conversation about whether or not we perceive spirits. Of that, you are certain. It's an internal claim that is imminently presenting itself to you. Whether you infer anything from that experience, certainty starts to go out the window, but that you have that experience, I think, is certain. When we start trying to talk about things like making claims about trees or quantum mechanics or the universe or elephants or whatever, we have to have a concept of the things about which we're making claims. And when we compare a claim with somebody else's counterclaim, we have to understand the concepts in their counterclaim. The concepts are derived from our experiences, not the other way around. So when I construct my concept of what a tree is, that's going to be different, almost by definition, than what your concept of a tree is, simply because the way I build my concept of a tree is through a series of experiences. Now, if I was in a different culture that didn't have the concept of tree, but instead had the concept of dryads or had ways of differentiating or lumping things that in this culture, in this language, we lump together or separate, then my concepts would be almost incongruent with your concepts. And we couldn't actually even begin to talk about the certainty of a claim because the concepts that we've constructed are different. How do we know that the concepts that we've constructed are different? And how can we be certain when they're the same? So I think there's constructed knowledge or constructed claims, constructed concepts about the external world, and everybody needs to triangulate against everybody else's internal conceptual framework. But the thing that is certain is that the experiences that you had to build that conceptual framework were the experiences that you had.
That's very
Everything else out there, there's almost no certainty because of this problem of conceptual frameworks.
No, that's very interesting, Al. Thank you very much. I'm just wondering if I look at a tree and somebody from another culture looks at a tree, I presume that we're seeing something that I call a tree and he calls a globob, for example.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So it doesn't really make any difference because
let me place the missing piece here, Ron. The missing piece is that I have to have something in my head. I have to have something in my cognition that I take that experience of the tree and I say it is an instance of this thing. If I didn't have that unifying concept, then every experience would be unique. Because every tree is unique and every angle that I look at the tree is unique and every season that I look at the tree is unique, right? So I have to have some way of lumping these repeated differentiated experiences into some category that I call tree.
Okay.
Right. So when you have your unseeing people feeling the elephant, right? They're all touching what seeing people think is the same thing, but they have different experiences that they can't unify. So it's the unifying concept that determines whether or not we can share an experience of conceptualizing of the same thing. This is why the morning star and the evening star are different at a certain point, and then they come together. Not because we've actually got different experiences of them, nor because we've run into different cultures, but because we've linguistically created a way of communicating a unifying concept that allows us to grab two different experiences and lump them into the same conceptual container.
That's very interesting. What you said about the elephant and everybody touching, etc., etc. Everyone who touches that part of the elephant, that's what there is.
That's the experience, yeah.
Okay, but wait. You are saying they can't see the whole thing, but they don't have to see the whole thing.
They don't have to.
No, but that's it. What they're holding, that's it.
What they're experiencing is what they're experiencing. Some of them may actually have a unifying concept called elephant and have had previous experiences that they can lump together. And they say, this is the leg of the elephant.
Okay.
And I know it's an elephant. Some of them may have not had that experience and they may say, this is a tree.
Okay. That's fair.
So there's this interesting problem of mediating and lumping unique experiences, truly differentiated, unique experiences, because every single thing you look at is a new experience of that thing you're looking at. And there's this unifying grouping in your head, and it has boundaries that says this experience is of that, and this experience is not of that. Before you start identifying trees, all trees are trees. Then when you start realizing that maples and oaks exist, you start subdividing mentally in your head, but you're using somebody else's concepts that you've absorbed through linguistics, unless you're a dendrologist who's doing the research to try to find the differentiation through, right? Like, so there's this construction that we do. So when we say maples make sugar, can we be certain of that fact? Is it a fact? Or is it actually a self-consistent claim within a linguistic construct for us to align these unifying containers of concepts? And other people would say, no, there are 18 different things that make
Yeah. Thank you very much. Very interesting, Al. Thank you. Thank you. Anton, good to see you again.
Oh yeah, it's great to be here. This is such an interesting conversation. But what we're discussing. So one of the things you might have already answered this, Ron. I did get here late, or maybe even in a prior meeting that you had that was about approximation, because of what I'm about to say. So the question I have is, can we get close to certainty if not certain? That's what I think of when I think of the word approximate. Though that's not the only way you can think about it.
Yeah, yes, I mentioned that there is a difference between approximation and uncertainty. There is a difference, but it's difficult to actually touch, because approximation seems to me to be something that Josh mentioned, that there is approximate of something, which means that if there is something, there is an objective something that we're getting closer to, which is a problem for me. Whereas uncertainty is not quite there. I thought about it in the beginning. I could not work out what the difference really is, because once you start, you get into all sorts of difficult parts. But I think it's an epistemological thing. Approximation, everything is approximate and everything is uncertain. That makes them equal at that point. But there is a difference. There must be a difference, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah, it does seem like there is. I know this is mentioned more than once in the since it seems like there's an objective reality or objective realities, then it seems like there's degrees of uncertainty, as some people had said before. Also, I realize another thing you said, Ron, is we behave as if things are certain, and I definitely do. I think we do, but I realize as if certain is different than I am certain, at least for myself as an example. Like with the Apple example, once again, I know other people have used this. I behave and I perceive this apple to be here. If I actually ask myself, because I've done this thought experiment before, I don't know for sure there's an apple. I don't know for sure what I'm perceiving, but unless something happens that I didn't predict, that is new information or different information, I just behave as if it is certain. But I think it's important to be able to be, if you're like me, you realize I don't actually know for sure, but I'm certain enough, I guess is what you could say. And yeah, and also what's interesting, although I think this complicates it more, this is the last thing I have to say, is it possible, since it seems like there is objective reality or objective realities, that there's cases in which what's objective doesn't have a clear-cut answer? That could just be my naivete of what the answer is, but maybe objectivity in certain cases is not clear cut, and that's something I hadn't really considered before, as objective. So that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Anton. Thank you. Roland.
755648.
Can you hear me?
Would say that again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now yes.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Interesting discussion. Yeah, I got a few notes that I've been taking, although I'm having difficulty reading my writing. I suppose the first thing that occurred to me to talk about was, where does certainty happen? Because this strikes me as being quite important. It seems to me that certainty is a judgment of some kind, and only people can make those judgments. Well, let's say consciousness. So to outsource the idea of certainty to outside something or someone making that decision does not seem to be testable, or how will we know that? I can't see that's possible. So I would start by saying that certainty has to be something that someone experiences. So then the question is, what exactly are we talking about in terms of time? So there seems to be a great difference between certainty as a predictive behavior. So I predict the sun will come up tomorrow. Yes, I'm really certain about that. And that's something that hasn't happened yet. And I know it hasn't happened. And so there is a possibility that it might not, even though I feel very certain about it. I'll come back to that idea of what that might imply in a second. But first, but before that, I wanted to contrast that with the sense of what is going on in quote now, because there is a quality of experience that's, you could say, happening that I can't deny. So I can't deny at the moment that I'm sitting on a seat and I'm participating in this event at the moment. Am I certain of this? Well, yeah, I think I am. Yeah. And I'm certain because that is the nature of that experience. That's what I call certainty. Am I certain that I will be participating in this experience in 2 seconds' time? No, I'm not. Because by definition, the future is something I can't be certain of if I think of certainty in that way. It's kind of like an incoherent idea, certainty about the future. I've talked before about this idea of a square circle, which is also an incoherent idea, because you're looking for an event to occur that both has to occur and not occur at the same time. And when we have the idea of certainty about the future, we have that problem because we're trying to make an assertion that is a happening, and yet it's not happened yet. So there is an incoherence about the idea of certainty about the future right from the very beginning. It's not like it's not like it's a logical problem with the way in which the idea of certainty is being expressed. As I see it, because we don't know what's going to happen next, any type of behavior we express is like it's a bit like a template. It's a generic pattern that has to stabilize in the moment. So, for example, I could take a step, and I could feel certain that I'm going to land on a floor and so forth. But how I will land, in exactly what way, at what time, all the conditions around that are unknown to me as a precise event. What is known to me is that as I embark upon that course of action, I may be able to stabilize my behavior around it. So there is an engagement of what I might call a feedback loop at the moment of implementing a behavior that then allows that behavior to work. But it's not possible in advance of that to know exactly how it will work. It's only possible to determine or to have a, you could say, template for that behavior. So this idea of certainty about the future strikes me as incoherent for that reason, because the instance of a behavior happening, you could say an instantiation of a behavior or a prediction, is different from the prediction itself. And in that sense, I quite like what Al was saying, because he was referring to this idea that we understand patterns through bundling experiences and extracting a common element. And I think that is quite a good explanation. And when we think about the future, we are actually referring to the common element. We're not referring to the instance, because the instance hasn't happened. And so we can't possibly refer to it. We can only refer to the bundle of possibilities in some pattern form and expect that the future that actually happens fits the criteria of that pattern in some way. Where I think I'd depart from what Al said, well, I don't know whether I'm departing from it or not, but a difference that I noted at the time was that there is a tendency in talking about these things still to try and refer to the thing in itself. George, was it George, mentioned that obviously in a heated discussion earlier in the form of spirit. And I think when one starts thinking in that way, it instantly creates a problem, because you're trying to assert the existence of something, whatever we call it, spirit, concept, or whatever, that is somehow shared by everyone. There's no way of determining it. There's no way of proving it, as we noted in the discussion with Ron. Ron said, "No, that's not what I think," and yet George is saying, "Well, it is." And you know, who's going to decide that? Is obviously not possible. So I guess that's most of what I wanted to say about this idea of certainty. That there was particularly the difference between in time. What I call, the name I give to what I suppose most people call now is a sort of confluence. It's like a confluence between my expectations and the emergence of, I don't know, being or whatever you call it. That point of confluence seems to come with a quality of certainty, because it's happening, that is different from my predictions about the future. They're a totally different thing. The other thing I wanted to say was, stepping back from that, when we start talking about certainty as an idea that could be there, then it seems to me we're taking a kind of God view, which is like determining whether certainty is a thing or not. And that strikes me as problematic as well, because it seems to be objectifying the idea of certainty. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roland. Very interesting points there. Thank you. And James, at last, you've been very patient.
Yeah, I think Ronald's explanations were pretty on point. And of course, I loved Al's ideas extremely. I think they were very helpful. When the meeting started, I only really had one thing to say. I wanted to talk about the certainty of death, or try to give an extreme point, make an extreme point about how very few things are really certain. As a matter of fact, there's a kind of I guess there's a truism that by her, maybe it's by Mencken or something like that. The death and taxes are the only things that are certain in life, or something like that. And I was sort of starting from that point, but I think a lot of things people said, including Josh, I think put me on and some people before him too, put me on the right track. People were talking about certainty and the relativity of certainty, that and how it's different in different places, different times, different things, and so on and so forth. And I think you even mentioned that the times of the certainty would matter, and so forth, times of the events, and and you were right in mentioning a whole lot of philosophers. I think a lot of these philosophers contributed something to these concepts. I think where it boils down is in rationality. But it's all in rationality, how things are comparable mathematically in the mind, how the concepts are understood by us as mattering in one way, or more significant or less significant, or having more power or less power and than others. And the absolute certainty, of course, is very hard to find, but I think we can find it if we take something like death. Our death seems certain. The death of a hunter, when a hunter is hunting, he expects the death of the prey. If the hunter fails, the hunter has to go back and reconsider how to kill the prey, partly because he wants to make sure that the dinner comes home with him, but he also probably feels compassion for the suffering animal. So so a more effective type of blow has to be chosen, and this is like a topic for people in the meat industry all the time. They have to put animals to death efficiently, or essentially, or not at all. There's not a possibility, so there's not a possibility of just like killing a percentage of the animals, and having a slow death for the rest. So yeah, so I think that's one of the best models, and I think that relates it back to the human will. We want things to be certain, and the things that we want to be certain the most tend to be the most certain for us. But they become certain for us because there's in this process of generating concepts, which of course Hegel was talking about. We can go back to Hegel and read him to see this discussion in probably its fullest form. But there is this idea that the thoughts have to create a kind of that I'll mention, that there's this the thoughts have to generalize. They have to create a universal. They need to universalize this big realm of things that need to be considered. And so if we don't do this universalizing process, we don't come up with any kind of certainty about which things do have a certainty. And so this idea of like epistemology, it has to be related back to existence, because existence is the starting point for universalizing concepts. So we start with existence, we universalize the concepts, and then we relate those rationally back to what our will is. Like, how do we want to describe the science, or how do we want to resolve the questions in science, or how do we want to solve the problems of human existence and human function and human society in the world. So I think those are the sort of the components of the argument that I learned here tonight, that I think are really important for understanding the connection that existence has to epistemology, which I think is what you're looking for, Ron. There's this whole graduation from just bare existence, which has very little certainty, maybe death and taxes, right? And then moving on through the process of universalizing all the way to conceptualization, universalizing, and finally arriving at certainty, a rational certainty of things in the world, or facts, rational certainty of facts, which at times just seems relative, but it becomes more it has more sense, right? It develops the German concept Sinne. Yeah, it develops more sense as you move towards the being able to place the imbibe the universals with meaning and content and purpose and so forth. And I think that's what George means by spirit, by the way, but it's a very difficult language to try to get your ideas across in. You have to speak modern English. You can't sort of like go back to the 18th century and and try to drag people along with you. Thanks very much.
I'm going to interrupt. Could we mute George's iPhone? Because we're picking up a lot of background noise.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. Maurice, you are very patient.
Yeah, patience is a virtue.
True.
And I am more confused now than I think I've ever been in any of your meetings, Ron.
I'm so pleased at last.
Yes, I thought you would be. I turn to you and to your participants every month to just give me a slightly more certain feeling of what I'm doing in this world and what it's all about. And now the whole lot of you have left me. I don't know what to do with it all. No, look, seriously.
Maurice,
and
Maurice,
James,
that's way too much of a burden, man. We don't deserve any of that.
James, you sounded a little apologetic, perhaps a little apologetic about mentioning the five-letter word and death. I mean, and I would like to really to say that I've always thought, ever since I read your book, Ron, I haven't always thought, but since I read your book, I thought I understood this subject of death. You see, I realized, having read your book, that since I didn't exist before I was born, and I won't exist after I die, and I'm living in this window of whatever it is we call it, that what is certain is exactly what James said. I'll leave out the taxes part, but the death bit. And then I say to myself, wait a minute, I know that everybody else will die. I am certain that every one of the people taking part in this Zoom meeting will die one day, one way or another. It'll happen. However, my problem now is I say to myself, my death will never happen. And it will never happen because I will never be aware of it. If I am never aware of it, you could say, really, I do say to myself that I am going to exist for infinity, whatever infinity is, because at whatever point I cease to exist, I won't know that there is anything that goes on beyond me. And that was, for me, that was infinity. So even, I pay taxes, by the way, and that I'm sure about. James, you're absolutely right about the taxes. That's true. But with the death bit, I'm beginning to doubt whether I can even be certain of that. You are leaving me up in the air, Ron.
I won't apologize for that bit, but that links to what Roland said, by the way. Said we can't, the future, it doesn't make sense to talk about what's going to happen. That's exactly what you're saying. You cannot talk about the future. It just doesn't make sense.
I go to sleep at night, just as we all do. I go to sleep at night, knowing with absolute certainty that I will wake up in the morning. I am certain of it. And I don't need to doubt that, because when the time comes, perhaps I pass away in my sleep, maybe tonight's the night, I won't know that that has happened. So I was certain, and I remain certain.
And you were right.
And I was absolutely right. But on the other hand, of course, everybody else can see I was wrong, because I didn't wake up in the morning. You are all going to know that I was wrong. We're looking for something which isn't there. And maybe it's only because of I'm sorry, I don't include you in this one. No. Leave you out of it.
Wait a minute, I might want to be part of it. Wait.
But it's, I think I've said enough. I really do.
Thank you very much, Maurice. That was a part of that book, the Nothing book, that was quite shocking to me when I realized where I'd got to. It really was, and it also affected me. I affected myself, not just you. But thank you very much. Thank you for that. That was very interesting. Dominic, welcome. Sorry
Yeah.
for the wait.
No, I'm really absorbing and listening. I find all this very stimulating. Thanks for hosting and for the conversations, everyone. So I tried to pick up a few points. I just made some notes here, and I hope everything I would say makes some sense. So first, talking about the triangles, because you mentioned them in your opening. And just the thought that comes to mind is that, in terms of, well, will I ever, think about a triangle differently? Maybe I'm, not me, but a great mathematician, or maybe some other philosopher will go, well, in what way could a triangle be different? What's going on there? It seems so fundamental and so on. But then I think maybe that's a good metaphor to use, and then to further use that metaphor within mathematics. You have non-Euclidean geometry, right? So you project the triangle onto a surface of a sphere, and suddenly you get a triangle where all its which can have more than 180 degrees on its corners. My language is using terminology very badly here, but you know what I mean. Suddenly you get a weird thing where it all works out, that triangle, where all its kind of angles can have more than 180 degrees. So to me, that is an interesting metaphor for saying, well, you have a certain paradigm, you have been looking at the world through a certain perspective, working from certain axioms and certain frameworks, and then you go, well, this is how the world is like, and mathematics is fundamental. And then different other kinds of axioms and so on come in, and new mathematical objects, and then suddenly even the triangle, which maybe previously seemed to be very fundamental in some sense, is not so fundamental. And even if you look at 2 + 2 or something, essentially like this, you need axioms for that too. And I could have looked it up, but I didn't. But I think there's something alongside paleo axiom is called, which defines what a successor is. What is a successor? What is this thing, object 2 coming up, succeeding after 1? What is a succession even? So I'm currently taking the position that mathematics is a human product. Some people maybe want to slaughter me now, but that's just the current perspective I have at the moment. And what this is to say is that one or the other way, you work from a certain framework, and you work from some set of assumption, aka axioms, to build a framework through which you look at the world. And once you have that framework, within that framework, I call it framework, or maybe system, system builders and so on, philosophy, it will provide you certain answers to certain questions. And I think conversations and debates can be very confusing, or can get mixed up or convoluted if person A is talking from the perspective axiomatic system A, and another person is talking from an axiomatic system B, and those two people meet and they think, oh, we can't agree. Well, look, both positions can exist at the same time. Just to give another example, it's a something Tarski paradox. You can somehow make another sphere in mathematics, a mathematical object. You can sort of, through just a matter of transformations, out of one sphere, just make another one, and without actually adding or removing anything. You're just making a set of transformations, which are very smart mathematically. And if you allow certain axioms into mathematics, it makes perfect sense. So you got basically a second sphere out of nothing, just because you turned it in space in one or the other way, all its components. don't beat me down on the mathematics, but you can look it up. I can post it on the chat as well. So, and didn't you think, oh, is this a mathematical paradoxon or what's going on? No, it's just, again, you allow different axioms into your system, you get different answers, you get different solutions. You know what I mean? So I just put this on the table, and Von Arctarski paradox. Sorry, I put
yeah, no.
yeah. And I don't know if you allow another quick point. I know there's a queue, but is actually about neural networks. So I think if you look at neural networks in more detail, again, I'm not an expert or anything, but in some sense, what a neural network is doing is that approximation. So basically, a neural network is, in a sense, a function-making machine. You have X and f of X, and then what the neural networks finds you for certain input data and for certain output data, it finds you the function such that for a certain input, you get a certain output. And it's trying to, depending on how you build your neural network and, how you design it and how you, what formulas you put into the nodes or the thresholds, it can be very efficient for certain use cases and for some less. But I guess to say in terms of approximation, which was one of your key topics today, that's what, as far as I know, neural networks are doing. You have a learning process by which you tune that neural network until certain input data will produce certain output data. And it's approximating. So a good example for that is face recognition. So if you feed in, 1 million human faces into it, it can then even maybe make a prediction about, well, if someone has this kind of eye and this kind of mouth, what will the nose look like? That's an approximation based on a certain given data. What would be the output? And now we'll close by saying the keyword here is thresholds. You can define a threshold by which you're saying that the output is sort of matching the predictions, and you say this is sufficient enough. And then you go, if that's beyond the threshold, there's no more uncertainty. That is the result. But if you raise the threshold, you say, well, no, that's not certain enough, and let's put another million faces into the training data, and then until you go beyond the next threshold, you get an output. You have certainty. And the keyword is defining the threshold, I think. So just putting out these ideas on the table. Thank you.
That's very, very interesting indeed. Thank you very much, Dominic. Thank you. I think that the magic word is uncertainty or approximation. Once you realize that everything is approximate, once you realize that, the whole world opens. That seems to be the key. But the second you say that something's certain, you've closed the world. It has to be uncertain for you to move on.
It depends on the world you
yes.
frame.
No, definitely. You have your framework, and that is I'm certain within that framework. I don't like the word certain, but that's the framework, and I can work in that. But if you move out and you realize that hang on, that's not certain either, because you've moved out. And so this whole uncertainty business, I think, is vital in every way, vital life. And that's what fascinated me, by the way, the whole business of approximation, which fascinates Terry as well, which was the way we met, basically. But that's very good. Thank you very much, Dominic. Very, very, very interesting. Thank you. Josh, you're back again. You're still walking, I presume.
I can't disappoint. I have a reputation
so tired
to uphold.
Oh.
Do I look tired? Yeah. So let me see if I can pick up on the trajectory here. The conversation is moving in. We've talked about some interesting topics in relation to the loosening up of our understanding of the hold or the consistency between choosing something, choosing to will something, and then the outcome. That we can't really be totally responsible for that outcome. So there's an element there of mystery, of unpredictability between input and output, between decision and action. So I want to, I've been thinking about Wittgenstein's last work on certainty, in which he takes on this topic, and he addresses G.E. Moore's writings about certainty, in which Moore takes as an example his hand. I'm looking at my hand, and I am certain that this is my hand. And Wittgenstein analyzes it, but he analyzes it in terms that are consistent with the turn that he took in his later work, away from logical analysis in the direction of a pragmatic notion of language games and use. And according to that, and what he arrived at there was a very nuanced, subtle way of understanding what it is we're doing when we are making use of any kind of a term, whether it's a term like certainty or any other. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it's been mentioned here before. I guess I was one of the people that mentioned it, that the very notion of certainty, if you take a look at it, the etymology of the word and the history of the use of the word, that I'm guessing that the concept of certainty it's being put under attack here is a relatively modern notion. It's Enlightenment notion. If you were to go back into earlier points in Western history and to non-Western cultures, you would probably find that notion of certainty doesn't exist. The one the particular one I think that we have in mind, for example, calculating the mass or the energy of an electron to the nth decimal place. That's a kind of a modern scientific notion of certainty that wouldn't make sense. It's not simply that it wouldn't be something that ancients were capable of, but that they wouldn't even formulate their relationship to the world in those terms. Now, I want to add to that if you start with the actual context in which we use words, it's those contexts that create the sense of the words. So words that seem to us to be stable that we grab at, table and chair and spirit of table and chair, which seem to be in what they are in themselves, whether we think of them as concepts that we created through, as human beings, or whether they have some sort of Platonic essence into themselves. There's this assumption that there's a certain in itself stability of the meaning of these concepts, and that we simply use words like tools. Whereas Wittgenstein wanted to point out that when we use a word, we reinvent it, we recreate the word. We can't rely on rules or social rules for usage, say what the word means in a dictionary or how it's been used the day before. It's not that we don't make use of that, but when we actually use the word, we're using it, we're seeing how in the actual context that the sense of the prior use changes. It goes back to Ron's example of what happens to memory. The future of the memory rewrites the memory. So our actual usage of words like certainty rewrites to some extent our previous usage of it. So I would want to say that if one wants to make a statement that we can't be certain that if you sit down with somebody who says, I believe in certainty, you pluck somebody out of a time capsule from let's say Newton from the 1700s, and you say, I hate to break it to you, Sir Isaac, but we cannot be certain. All we can do is approximate. We cannot be certain. That makes it sound as if we're disappointing them. We're taking something away. And I think that if you understand our usage of words and our changing use of words like certainty, it wouldn't be that at all. To the extent that Ron has a notion that maybe changes maybe his previous, and maybe he always thought that certainty was a canard, but or maybe just only recently recognized that his recognition isn't simply a staying with the same notion of certainty and then having a different position on it, but it's changing the sense of it. So he's not really disappointing anybody. He's not taking something away. I would argue that he's adding something. He's enriching the understanding of it. I would say that anytime anybody uses the word certainty in all the different ways in which we mean, and I'm certain of this, or, I certainly think that, if you look very carefully at why they're using that word in that context, what it's doing for them, what is it they're hoping to accomplish, that in fact, the word does what it's supposed to do for them. So you're not taking anything away from them if you then counter their particular usage of that word and you come up with a new usage, which may be a richer one. That may involve sort of digging beneath the generating process for their use of the term. If you're digging beneath it, you're not putting their understanding of the word into question. What you're doing is you're adding you're enriching it with a kind of a set of grounds or non-grounding grounds, and it gives you options of being able to see a certain kind of potential for creativity that the person who holds on to a notion of certainty is missing. It's not that in their use of that word, when somebody says, I've calculated, the spin of the electron to such and such decimal places, that certainty is untrue. It's that when you ask the question, why is that important to them? What is it they're doing with that certainty? What is it being used for? And then you come up and say, well, read Later Wittgenstein. What he's saying here is that what you're doing when you're celebrating this achievement of yours, and achieving this mathematical precision, that that usage can is a part of a kind of a flowing becoming of usages of meaning, and so there is what you can do by pointing out this pragmatic use-based understanding of our relationship to concepts is you can encourage people to kind of accelerate their creative becoming, right? Because we're never really stuck with them. People, and even I use the term, frame. A mathematical frame would be an axiomatic system, right? Within cognitive science, within neural networks, they have notions of frames, but the frames don't really hold us, because even within a frame, we're changing. To understand what Wittgenstein's point, that in our actual usage of our understanding of meanings within a frame, we're not within the frame. We're always redefining the frame, but often very, very slowly, and so slowly we fool ourselves into believing that there's no change, that there are these set, actual, firm, persistently present objects that we can achieve this precise certainty about in terms of our scientific descriptions of. So to counter that, again, is not to take that away from them. It's to say, yeah, that's good, but the joy that you're achieving from this from this achievement is not that of nailing something down as something, because as soon as you nail it down, it's dead. It loses its meaning. It's like repeating a word over and over again. The more you repeat it, the less it has any meaning left in it. So certainty in that sense is the disappearance of all meaning. It's a kind of an absolute death. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can I cut you off at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, but none of it is very, very interesting what you're saying. I'm just wondering whether it's the advance of knowledge that changes the vocabulary that goes with it, so that it's a possible cycle. It's not that the knowledge in the past was wrong; it was right at the time. The language was correct at the time. We can't say it was wrong. We can say that what we're doing now is what we believe to be right. But tomorrow, someone will say, well, you were wrong. But we weren't wrong when we were doing it. And I think that's a sort of a spiral of language and knowledge that's moving forward. That knowledge creates new language, or rather same words used in a different way, the way you mentioned it. That's how I see it anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I would just plug that into the relationship. I would just plug in, make sure we keep a hold of the relationship between what we call knowledge or epistemology and our purposes, our usages for that knowledge, because the knowledge doesn't mean anything without seeing it in the context of what we're using it for and why it matters to us. Why it matters is not something subjective and extraneous to the knowledge. It is what is the most fundamental thing that defines knowledge as knowledge. I think.
Yes, very true. Thank you very much there, Josh. Thank you. Very good. Madeline, you're back again. Good, nice. Yes.
Briefly, I was going to say that if we have or are reaching the point where AI can extrapolate beyond inputs and outputs, learn things just using the information that it has because of the way that it's being built, and act independently, then I would say we could argue that it has a mind, and that even whether or not it has a mind is a matter of semantics, because at that point, it's not even as important as making sure that we have alignment. And there, Elon Musk and others who are creating this technology have been talking about the importance of alignment. So everything Dominic said made sense to me. Everything Mark said was also interesting. And I'm still learning about the capabilities of all of this. But as to the question of whether or not it had a mind, I would say if it can operate independently outside of human influence, then we could argue that it has a mind. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you very much, Madeline. Thank you. Roland, have another bash.
Yeah. You can hear me, can you?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, sort of picking up on a few things. I suppose one of the things that just struck me about what Madeline said is, I mean, how do we know anything else has got a mind anyway? That's always a problem. I mean, the Turing test and so forth. So, but moving on from that, I suppose the example of the triangle was quite nice as an illustration of how something can be certain and then suddenly not be. I'm a sailor, and triangles definitely don't have angles adding up to 180 degrees. If you're a sailor, they're always more than 180 degrees because they're spherical triangles. So
oh, that's
it's quite an interesting. Oh yeah,
Oh.
and they can be as much as 540 degrees. So I guess what's interesting about that is that the criteria for what one is calling a triangle is changing. There's a set of assumptions behind the idea of a triangle, which I mean they're really quite interesting too, because when we think of a normal triangle with angles that add up to 180 degrees, that no one's of course ever seen one of those. It's an imaginary thing because it's two-dimensional and you can't find one. So the thing that's quite interesting about the triangle example is how it brings back the question of evaluation to the evaluator. Again, it comes back all the time to who is making this evaluation and what are the criteria they've got that they're using. So that, I suppose, is one issue, which I guess I keep on plugging, is like, well, you know, don't we have to come back to some sort of basis for how these evaluations occur? Because it's so easy to project it out there as being something out there, when all the time these decisions, these judgments are actually being made by people. And that becomes the core question. What is the mechanism behind making those sort of judgments? I don't really see how we can get out of that as a kind of basis for understanding any of these questions. Well, death. I was thinking about death as well after Morris was saying it. I don't think we can ever be certain about death because, again, the same problem arises that I've mentioned before, and that is that at the point of death, the evaluator that is seeking to identify death has gone. So there's nothing there to evaluate. It's like a computer trying to find out whether it's switched off. There's no processing. In fact, even the whole thing is that it's a bit like Ron's definition of nothing as the absence of everything. If everything isn't there, how can anyone know there's nothing? Or how can even one ask the question? Because there's nothing to ask. So that was another aspect. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was, why do we even look for certainty? That's come up as an idea. And to my mind, this is something to do with anticipation. It seems to me that life is it's an organizing structure. It's self-organizing, and it seeks its continuity. And that very idea of continuity carries with it so many different implications. Continuity is is something that can be unpacked into such phenomenal complexity very quickly. But the idea behind continuity must include the notion of prediction of change, the possibility of change, and behaviors that enable that system of continuity to deal with that change. And therefore, it seems to me to be absolutely inextricable with the very idea of life that there is anticipatory mechanisms within it. And those anticipatory mechanisms are looking to establish behaviors that enable its continuity in an integrated form. So this concept of anticipation seems to me to be at the very heart of survival, of life, of everything, really. And so it seems very likely that we would have quite sophisticated systems for doing that. Pattern recognition and being able to imagine the instantiation of a pattern in the future seem to be very key elements of that. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roland. Very interesting. Thank you. Mark.
At long last. I'm just going to keep mine quick. I was going to respond to something you said earlier that, approximation is necessary, and that's how you and Terry met. And I was going to say, well, what are you approximating? And so, of course, you're approximating some kind of certain structure in itself. And that certain structure is just as necessary as the approximation. And the reason why our mathematics and our models in this finite world are always sort of like a bad infinite, like an endless repeating that always has like a little remainder, is because it's in opposition to the world which is whole, that has no remainder. And that world is what religion was trying to call God and all this kind of stuff. But really, if you're secular, this proof shows that you can know that now. And then you can rebuild your knowledge in this world in a holistic way. And that's what objectivity was supposed to be. So this two-sidedness, which ends up in this endless approximation, comes together in a completeness. And it doesn't matter what side you are on anymore. Religious, secular, male, female, capitalist, communist. There's 200 of these contradictions that are uncertain or sloppy or approximate concepts. We don't really know what they are. We have intuitions of them, but actually we can redefine them in this notional form, which gives them a sense of absolute certainty grounded upon an axiom that proves itself. It's a self-evidence that has no presupposition. And I think in previous talks, we talked about this, Ron, so I don't think I'll go over it again here, but I think it has extremely pragmatic consequences right now. And I really feel like we have to figure out some kind of way to get people to understand this, because we will just go on this conversation infinitely. And I don't think we're going to be able to fix ourselves, never mind train an AI. We have like this meta crisis happening, a poly crisis with like AI, CRISPR, World War III seems to be building, climate change, the meta crisis, suicide rates are at all-time highs right now. I really feel like no one has any answers at all. Hopelessness, at least in Canada, is increasing. And I think that this is at least something that no one's ever tried before. That is really worth putting in your book. So I'm going to plug it if you put it in there, Ron. I'll help get you a market and you'll become the millionaire philosopher that you're supposed to be, so you can get us out of this uncertain period and into the bastion of stability and goodness that we are certain is within your reach and power.
I love to see certainty talking. I love it. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mark. Dominic.
Hey, again.
Yeah.
Sorry about my ranting about talk time. Obviously, it applies to me as well, so cut me off if.
No, that's fine.
Right. Okay. I know a few thoughts. Again, I'm taking notes here. I try to pick up a few points again. But one thing that comes to mind first is I think I'm sure several here have heard of this Laplace demon. Laplace demon, you know, this whole idea that, you know, the Newtonian clockwork universe, and, you know, if the Laplace demon is this, you know, thought experiment about whatever the mechanism the demon represents is some kind of entity that can have, you know, knowledge about all current states of possible, no, sorry, all the current states of reality of the world, and therefore predict, you know, completely what T-shirt are you gonna wear in 5 years' time on an afternoon, you know. And it is quite interesting that, you know, that would actually be one, you know, that would be one way of achieving certainty, you know, this certainty. And like you said one earlier, you know, in some sense, this would be a form of, would that be really alive? Would we be still in a living, and that now I'm speaking, you know, from an intuition, but in a living world, if Laplace demon was possible in our physical world? That means, as far as I understand, then the next step from, you know, this Newtonian clockwork idea then has been, you know, put to rest, and then you have Einstein, and then you have quantum physics and so on, and quantum mechanics and so on, by which, as far as I understand, Laplace demon is in principle impossible. So having that being that can know all the current state, you know, even in theory, have current knowledge of all the states, let's say, of all the atoms and whatever's in the atom and so on in the world, and then predict, you know, based on these conditions, what will happen in 5 years. And what is quite interesting is that it turned out that, in fact, you know, this level of certainty is in principle, according to current, you know, state of the art physics, not possible in principle. That as far as I'm aware, I mean, it goes all the way, trickles down to maybe Schrödinger's uncertainty principles and so on, and then, you know, propagation of the wave function, so on. Thumbs up. Okay, good to have some confirmation. So that's actually just one thing to point at, to go, okay, where were we at historically in terms of certainty, no certainty, possibility, and so on. There you go. So Laplace demon, so has died. So there you go. That's maybe one sort of answer to the question. And then one way of looking at it. The other thing actually I wanted to put as a question to the group is, I don't know if that's a thread someone wants to pick up on. If you look at the, you know, Everettian point of view and multiverse, you know, if the double slit experiment, one way of, you know, if you take it really seriously, you know, duality, wave and particle and so on, and if you really take it very seriously, you end up, you know, and move from there, you end up with the whole idea of, you know, everything that could possibly happen in some sense happens. You're just not in that branching of reality and so on. If there was this God mode view onto the, you know, on the wholly unfolded kind of, you know, reality and so on, would you be back at actually with the Laplace demon then back actually, and do you have full knowledge and certainty, or what does that mean? You know, because then you say, well, it was uncertain what T-shirt I would wear tomorrow, and turns out I didn't wear the green but the red one. But in another reality, in another branch of reality, you are wearing the green one, or, you know. So it did actually happen. There's no uncertainty. There is a God mode view of the world where just you're wearing every possible T-shirt you could have been possibly wearing anyway. And then there's no uncertainty. It's just everything that possibly could happen. So does happen. I wonder if someone, I mean, does that resolve that to we have no more uncertainty than in the world. And I don't know, I haven't thought that through entirely, but maybe there's something more to say about that. So that's it.
Yeah, but you have to have certainty that you've got unlimited universes, and I'm very uncertain about that.
Yeah, no, again, right, I'm just offering, if there's something apparently where we can do, apply the scientific method, we possibly, I don't, as far as I know, there's ultimately no way currently somehow measuring or determining if actually that branching is happening, but at least there's some serious mathematics and so on that point at this very real sort of possibility. And once you have that standpoint, would it be true that there is actually no uncertainty, but there would be something there to work from using these scientific methods, which
that's an enormous question mark. The question mark is covering my whole screen. If it's possible that there are unlimited number of universes, then ... That's what you're saying?
Well, I would say I don't think that the way this Everettian view works, that they're actually saying there's like universes, as in a whole thing, another Big Bang or something. It's just like whole reality. Everything is actually sort of waves, and everything in some sense finds an articulation in reality and comes into existence. But
I'll comment very specifically on that in a minute.
Okay, if Terry is next, I want to elaborate on that. I don't know. Yeah.
So Dominic, I was just going to ask: is there a can you see these as phases of the mind working on problems like certainty and uncertainty? Could they just simply be phases, necessary phases in thought?
But it's sort of unfolding, Hegelian kind of.
I'm afraid so, Dominic. I'm stuck there. I mean, could they just be phases, necessary phases that we have to?
Well,
pass
I
through?
think if I think, and I mean, speaking as a hobbyist, really, but if you say phases, then you're still, I dare say, you're assuming there is a time, some sense of time, because you're transitioning from one state to the other. And as far as I know, there's different views. One is the block universe where everything is, already there for you. Then there's, I think, presentism, which says only the thing is real as that slice through the block universe, where you currently are. There's the past is gone, the future is not there yet. You're just on that slice traveling, And then, or if you are assuming that, there's just the block universe, even the future in some sense has already happened, then there is no phases in the first place. So you have no real transitioning or dynamics of unfolding at all. The whole structure is already there. You're just, passing through, experiencing it, but it's actually only there. You know what I mean? And then there is no phases in the first place.
No, but someday you're going to have to choose, right? You can't sort of like hold on to this ambiguity for your whole life. You can't believe in two different exclusive concepts at the same time. The block universe and
no, I think they can. Yeah, I think that's correct. It would be one or the other. Yeah.
Thank you very much, George. Can you hear me? George, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Forgive me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Forgive me.
Good.
I'm going to say this. Okay. What we're certain of, I'm going to say this. I'm going to start from this frame and I'm going to then go down a bit. What we're certain of is the coherency of our reality. So one way people are talking about certainty and understanding in two different senses. Okay. But that's what it is. We have certainty in two different senses. One is that the ontological process of reality, we are certain of it. So we're certain that gravity will continue to work. We're certain that death will come. So that's the ontologically aspect. So again, it gives the very notion of certainty is derived from the coherency of our reality, right? Just like I can say right now, and again, this is the other sense of certain, which is I'm certain I'm looking at a tree. Now, you're going to say to me, okay, how do you know you're looking at a tree? Or maybe I see something else. Okay, But again, I mean, I'm not gonna appeal to Hegel because that, whatever the case may be. But I'm looking at a tree. Okay, and that's a common language use, right? So certain in the common language use has two dimensions. And again, philosophically, it's derived from the fact that we live in a holistic world, a coherent world, forgive me. We live in a coherent world. And so, ultimately, I think one of the methodological errors that is being made is that somehow we think we're going to find answers in the way that we look closer and closer and closer at something. We're going to somehow find an answer. And that, in some ways, philosophy is all about perspective, right? It's like, again, the elephant. If I'm so close to the elephant that all I can see is the skin, I'm not going to see the elephant, right? Now, there's a value in studying the skin, but we want to also study the whole. And again, you need perspective. So again, the idea that we're going to, look to quantum mechanics, or we're going to break this down to some kind of basic synthetic element, that is actually philosophically blinding, right? The philosophy is in the coherency of the world and understanding and engaging that coherency. And by that, I'm also referring to ideas of love and justice and fairness, right? That is part of the coherency of the world. So in that way, one can say, oh, I'm certain he's in love, right? Again, and this is all empirically driven, right? Because I'm seeing the behavior, right? Or I'm certain that he hates her, that kind of thing, right? So again, there is a coherency to the world. And this is why we can even use the idea of the very notion of certain, because like it's been said, right? The world is actually ontological. It is constantly changing, but it is changing in ways that are predictable, that are knowable, and that, so certainty. And mind you, I want to stress this, that throughout human philosophy, that has been understood. Again, this is why Plato appeals to the form, right? So he's saying, okay, we're not looking at a tree, we're looking at the form of tree. And this is why we can agree that is a tree, because we're all looking at the form of tree, right? So again, it's the idea that certainty is derived from the coherency, from the cosmos of the world around us, and that there's two dimensions that people have been referring to. There's two dimensions of certainty. One is ontological, and one is purely ontological. So we have certainty that in the future, gravity will behave this way, versus that I'm certain I'm looking at a tree. So, again, there's two dimensions to this, and the mind is continuously engaging, and philosophically, we continue to engage these two dimensions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much. Yoti, good to see you again, although I can't see you. But please, you're back. Can you hear me? Yoti, hello?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, good
Sorry.
to see you again. Oh, not
Good
see you again.
Oh, well, are
I
you
know.
certain you don't, are you certain you don't see me?
I can see a square with your name on, which is
There you go.
fine.
That's me.
That's okay. That's okay.
I would just like to say that my belief is that the only thing certain in lived experience is change and death. And that's it.
Okay. Death is only certain in the future.
Well, no, death can be in the
For
you could
you.
die.
No, for each
No, I'm
individual
sorry.
person. Can only
Yeah,
can
each
well,
individual person will die.
yes, but they won't know.
Can I say something?
No,
Just very briefly? Very briefly?
Yes,
How do we know that tomorrow, that tomorrow there's not going to be some solution to death? How do we know that?
Oh, tomorrow there won't be a solution to death, but I'm talking about right now. We don't know
There
what's going
will
to
be a
happen in the
solution to death.
future.
Tomorrow there will be a solution to death. There will be a solution to death.
Tomorrow there will be a
You don't know
solution to
that.
death. I'm completely like that's uncertain. There is no certainty in that. So that's why I'm talking about things that are certain.
Okay.
There's
I'm with
and there will
whoever's-
so wait, so that goes on to the second part, which is change. The only thing certain is change. Okay, take away death. There will be change.
That's because of time. When there's time, there's change. Okay.
Well, when there's place, there's change too.
When there's what?
When there's place, there's change too.
Well, there has to be time if there's place.
Well, but why are we arguing? I mean,
I don't know.
Why are we arguing about time?
Because you talked about change, and change is time. Time is change. You can't have change without time.
So
okay. No, we agree.
No, yeah, exactly.
No, it's fine. We're agreeing.
So are we arguing about? I mean, are we discussing? I don't want to use an aggressive word. Are we not certain about time?
I'm certain about time. I'm certain about change. I agree with you.
Okay, there we go.
So there you have it.
End of discussion.
Thank you very much, Jyoti.
Did you mean to pull me out of the line, because I was in earlier, but my hand is.
Well, I'm sorry. What did you say?
Did you mean to pull me out of line because I was?
No, I didn't pull you. I'd never pull you out of line, Terry.
No,
never. It was an act of God. But
this happens when someone accidentally speaks on the mic. I think Zoom has this feature where it then lowers the person's hand automatically, and even by accident.
Thank you. You saved me, Dominic. I didn't do anything. I swear it. Terry, Maurice, okay, we'll let Terry speak now. Right, Terry. No, still not.
No, I just had to unmute. I was using the button. I had to unmute. Dominique, you talked about Laplace's demon, which is the infinite differentiability. The block universe is what happens if you put Laplace's demon on particles. The many worlds is what happens if you put it on the wave function. And there's actually a very nice symmetry between those two. Both of them require infinite resolution, infinite information, infinite capacity for storage. And as a computer person, this is one of the things I have huge problems with where physics has gone in the last century, is that they invoke infinite information storage without even blinking, despite the fact there is absolutely zero, literally no evidence for that in any physical phenomenon ever created. So I have problems with both of those, because they're assuming the resolution of infinite information capacity, a single point. You mentioned about to get the point definition, to get that full definition of how the universe is right now, it's worse than you might think. If you want to get the full information of one atom with the electrons moving around, where the electrons are exactly right now, exactly one point, with sufficient resolution to make them go in a certain path for the rest of eternity, you have to obliterate the entire universe in the explosion that results. That's how much energy it takes to find out where those particles are. And people, I don't know how physicists just skip over that, because you can't. There is no way to get the information without obliterating reality. And yet they act as if, well, it's no big deal. If you know where it is, which you don't, and you can't without obliterating it, why are you even proposing these ideas from a physicist viewpoint? The other thing is, Ron talked about, Josh, I had to mention this just to get it in. Is Josh still here? I think so. You mentioned that about the hand, Wittgenstein's my hand analogy. There have been really good studies in which people lose track of their hand, and they think that a mannequin is their hand, to the point where they scream if they see something hit the mannequin hand. Our perception of what is even part of our own body is far more malleable than people realize. But there's a reason. That's why we can drive a car and make the car feel like it's part of our body. It's built into us. We have something there. But I just thought it was an interesting thing when you brought that up. The final thing was certainty of math. One of the reasons why we have the problems with Laplace's demons, why we have multi-worlds, why we have infinite deterministic universes, is we're using classical maths that none of them respect either quantum mechanics, which prevents particles, or to relativity, which prevents infinite spaces of the type that we're familiar with. They're only an approximation that works in a short range. And our maths are based on 1700 and 1800 concepts that are not true. And that's an amazing thing. So you're talking about levels of certainty. Again, programming, backtracking, error analysis. Physicists would never say that, oh, the math might be wrong. Math is sacred. Math is absolutely perfect. No, it isn't. It's not. It is a technique. And the technique that we have with simple assumptions about points, spaces, and orthogonality are all based on very difficult, very costly things that make our reality possible. That's why they're so important to us. But they're not givens. You know, we take these fantastically complex things like space and time as if it's, well, it's a given, obviously. Oh, no, it isn't. You know, there's something more going on. So,
Terry, you wouldn't be a fan of Tegmark's mathematical universe then, right?
Oh, no, I would not.
All right.
The first time he did a book on AI, I was about ready to, I go like, come on, guy, you're over there, leave us alone. You know, you got your physics thing. So he wanted a book. You know, he wanted a book on AI. So he had, I don't remember what it was, but that was kind of course I should talk. I'm a computer guy going over in physics, but you know, but I thought it was very amusing when Tegmark decided to come over on the AI side and start talking as if he knows all about AI, and he doesn't know anything. You know, I guess he knows some now, but with the time he wrote that book, it was not. I am done. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Terry. Morris.
Just before I say good night and thank you to everybody, and I'm certain it's quite late. I just wanted to thank you for your wonderful meeting again this evening, Ron. Whilst talking about certainty or uncertainty all evening, for me it's evening, I thought to myself, who do I know who is certain? And there are a few people that I personally know who are certain. Some of them are religious, and their certainty comes from their belief in whatever it is they believe, and it gives them a feeling of certainty. All the others that I know who are certain are psychotic. Thank you for everything. Good night.
Thank you. Dominic, can we go to Ali before you, because he hasn't spoken yet, and I think it's the first time with us. So Ali, thank you for your patience.
Oh no, actually I really enjoyed so much the discussion. So I want to give my idea about this discussion, and that's before I thought that certainty is totally subjective. But I believe now that certainty is a combination of subjectivity and objectivity. So I give an example. If I have a dice and I threw the dice, what is the probability that I get number 1? Everybody knows it would be 1/6. But what would be the certainty if I threw a dice and get number 7? Everyone would be certain that it would be 0, the probability. So everybody could be certain that I never get number 7, 8, or any other else. So it means that if I'm the creator of that dice, I know exactly what numbers are there and what numbers could come up. So I would never be uncertain about number 7 or 8. I'm certain it won't happen. So that makes me think that the subject here, if it's the creator and has all the information about the object, the person can be certain. But we are human beings. We are not creator. And we are created, or we are made, or we happen to be there. And we have not much enough information about everything or anything, even ourselves. So that becomes a condition of human being to be always uncertain, because we don't create anything and we don't have all the information to be certain.
Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you. I hope to see you next time again, which is okay. Thank you very much. So that leaves us Dominic, and then we're going to wrap up.
Ah, okay. You finish at the hour, is it?
No, no. We finish when you all stop talking.
Okay.
This can go on all night, all day, all night, or all week.
Oh,
I mean,
right. I figured that by now only the hardcore science nerds are.
Hardcore is left. Hardcore is left.
Yeah, no, a little bit working more from Terry's kind of comment there, from your comment there. I came across another actually idea or concept or thought experiment that what if you wanted to have an entity that has all knowledge that could possibly be out there, that even this is a contradiction in itself, even in physics, in physical terms, because that information would need to be stored, and that storage itself would be so massive that there must have been a mass ascribed to that storage, and that means it would collapse at some point into a black hole. And then there's a problem in terms of actually realizing that according to the laws of physics, because yeah. And I guess the other question is, when does the map become the territory? Because when I'm a mind that has some kind of mirroring of reality, you know, that is then encoded in some kind of configuration of neurons and their interactions. But if I acquired all possible knowledge and states of the reality in my mind, then at what point actually my own storage in some sense in it is the same as the universe that I'm in. So it becomes the same thing. So what do I have knowledge of, and where am I? When you know, then you run into a paradoxon. Then I am all knowledge at some point when you drive it towards a maximum, you know. So, and then it becomes a little bit strange. And because that's paradox, then maybe there's something wrong in our assumptions about, you know, having unknowledge, and hence then trying it back to the topic, eliminating all uncertainty. So maybe there's some ways to really say that eliminating all uncertainty for any entity that can contain knowledge is in principle impossible, because at some point that entity itself would basically either become the thing that it wants to know of and hence stop existing. So something around that, which seems to be a bit paradoxical. So quite interesting how sometimes it can turn out that things maybe in principle are impossible because you're violating your own axioms, basically. The other thing I wanted to say about death actually is, I think, yeah, to me, there is a way of looking at the world philosophically where there is no such thing as death, but then there's also nothing like birth. Because in order to die, and the common concept of death would assume that you're some kind of finite object and that has somehow grown in time or something like that, right? So, and we humans tend to, you know, work from these kind of ideas, you know, there's such a thing as time. I'm a finite object. I was born at that time. I will die at that time, you know, and entropy and all that. So, you know, yeah. But, you know, I dare say that that's a narrative actually that's constructed on the human mind. It's just, I think there's legit ways of thinking and conceptualizing about the world where, in fact, you know, thinking of yourself as an object with a beginning and an ending is not necessarily just the only way of looking at the world. You know, and then you get concepts where life, birth and death just do not exist. They are just not part of the idea.
As Roland would now say, how could you possibly not think that way if you're a human being? I mean, how? I mean, we're the only ones who are doing the thinking. Each of us.
Well, you could see yourself as just being, I mean, that gets maybe towards Buddhism or so, but an unfolding of the same thing that lives, in from just being one perspective of the same thing, and which will prevail sort of when you yourself are dead in the human terms. Really, you're just sort of it's just in a sense going back into being what you are already, or just being another version of that grander entity in some sense. You were just living from the idea, or in some sense an illusion, but I have to use the term carefully, that you're this one thing with a beginning and an ending. But this is just due to your own limitations and your inability to take into account all the information that is actually out there, sort of.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dominic. I hope to see you again next time.
Can I stay for another minute?
You can stay for as long as I'm here.
All right.
Because I have the magic switch.
You do.
I can make you all disappear in one fell swoop. I have ultimate power here. So people are coming back.
Are you certain?
I am.
Can I?
I refuse to answer that question. Roland.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on this map and ground thing and the Laplace demon, because I think there's a major flaw in that whole business. The thing about a map is that it's symbolic. It relates to sameness. So it identifies sameness within territory. So there is an analogy here between map and ground and analog and digital analog to digital conversion. Now, supposing you consider the idea of an analog wave and you try and digitize it. Now, if you can get a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller time scale of your digital sample, but you will never get to the analog, because at some point you're still measuring across the idea of sameness. So however small you end up, you're still dealing with sameness over time. So the concept of a map can never be of the same qualitative character as the ground under any circumstances, irrespective of the resolution, because the resolution is irrelevant. What's relevant is the distinction between the two processes, and the basic underlying concept behind symbolic representation is sameness and difference. If that is being applied to an analog field which is continuously changing, then it doesn't really matter how much resolution you get in your digitized model. You can never get to the analog because it's continuously changing. There are no differences and no sameness in an analog state. Now, this, I think, is one of the problems that underpins the idea of objectification too, because the pattern that we apply has to come from somewhere. When we conceptualize our experiences, when we look at what we call the world, the patterning that we are perceiving has to emerge from somewhere, and it has to have a quality of sameness about it. And the moment we are into sameness, we have stepped away from change and started to freeze it into stasis. And so I think that this difference between what I would call the digitization of an analog and the analog, and the idea of an underlying analog field is absolutely critical in considering these ideas of objectification, of certainty, and so forth. One has to look at the process that we're using in order to identify anything, and to create the appearance of sameness. And if one thinks in that way, it seems to me that sameness is a massive, irrespective of what resolution you're looking at, it's still a massive loss of resolution, because it has to be. The only way of creating sameness is to disregard change. There's no other way. So there must always be a loss of resolution. So that was one thing I was going to say, and another thing I was going to say. Sorry, Ron. Was the idea of uncertainty. It occurred to me that uncertainty is the inability to imagine something not happening. So I'll leave it with that.
No.
And shut up.
No.
Yeah, okay.
It's fine.
Ron,
Thank you very much.
Ron, could I let George go ahead of me here? I always disagree with what he says, but I love hearing it. So, and he's
Yeah,
walking.
I'm with you there. George, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I just wanted to very briefly contest this idea of birth and death, which is to say that I'm gonna go on a limb here, because I understand this crowd, and say that we know that people are born with pre-knowledge. And so ideas exist before us. And the logical conclusion in my mind is that we create ideas that then are passed on to future generations. Because of this pre-knowledge, and there has to be an ontological process to that pre-knowledge. And the very idea that, for instance, the claim is made that young people, gravitate and understand and maneuver technology much more readily than their older peers, again, is, I would say, empirical evidence that we create knowledge that then is, again, passed on. Now, again, I'm only challenging the certainty and uncertainty, if you will, of birth and death as cast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Where are we?
I think I'm next.
Who's the I?
Terry.
Terry. Oh, you went down there again. Okay, Terry, you're next.
I for some reason you could talk. It popped
It's not
up.
me. I promise you, I'm completely whatever. Terry, go for it.
I just want to comment real quick on what Dominic said. Dominic, what you described is called the vacuum catastrophe. If you put infinite density of any kind of information into space, information absolutely has mass and energy. It is not some magical freebie thing. So the reasons why so many of our theories collapse into a catastrophe, called the vacuum catastrophe, is precisely that, is because they all assume fully classical, infinite information, points are free, ideas of certainty that date from the 1700s and 1800s, 700s, 1800s, before relativity, before quantum theory. It's built into the maths. You use those maths, you will get a vacuum catastrophe. There's not much other choice. And yet we keep doing that. The idea that information is free, computer scientists like myself, it's our fault. We built computers in the 90s that were so good at pressing bits into little bitty tiny disks that physicists who started getting interested in information science about that time, like Gerard Hooft, really got entranced by this idea. And they thought, oh, wow, this information is so small, it's free. It's free. That's the fabric of the universe. It's the fabric. It's what it's built from. And they went through these convoluted arguments. And the worst one, and Gerard Hooft, bless his heart, he's a really nice guy, Nobel laureate, but he put this paper out and he said, oh, the black hole surface, the infinite horizon, it's pure information. It's got little tiny bits, Planck scale bits. That's what it is. There's absolutely no justification for any of this. He's taken the infinite uncertainty and suddenly declaring it's a bit. It doesn't even make sense. If you're in computer science, you know that bits are actually some of the most complicated devices to build. You can make them very small. You can never make them infinitely small. And you cannot make one electron into a bit. That was another mistake people made. You have to have a machine with a magnetic field in the electron. Then you have a bit. So in a sense, we computer scientists created this disaster. We gave people the impression that bits are so cheap. And look, they're getting cheaper. I live in Ashburn. We got the centers all around us. But we gave the impression that it's infinitely cheap. And that's not the way things work. you have to face the uncertainty before you can pull back from it and see how do we get so much of what seems to be certainty. Anyways, I gotta go. It's great talking to everybody. A fun session this time. So see you.
See you, Terry. Thank you. Bye. We got Josh, make it short. Dominic, make it short. We've been at it for three and a quarter hours. Well, some of us have. And so one of us has been walking. You stopped, Josh. You stopped walking.
See, that shows you how late it is.
Oh, I'm completely disillusioned.
The last bit of certainty you had
yes,
in the world is now gone.
Oh,
even when all else fails,
exactly.
Josh would still be walking.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Right.
I was wondering about when Roland was talking about analog versus digital and ground versus map. I wasn't sure whether he was also referring to human perceptual capabilities in terms of and relating them to sort of the digital end of things as opposed to that which we are perceiving as being the analog end of things. And then I was also thinking about, well, I know Terry's just left, but Terry's talking about the concept of information it is used in computer science, and also uncertainty as it is used, say, in physics in terms of how entropy is defined. That's actually, well, uncertainty is also defined in terms of information, I guess. But I guess I just wanted to throw in, that the notion of information that is sort of been embedded in our skulls because of the success of digital technologies. Well, it's not the only one out there. That wouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But more importantly, I think it's sort of a limiting notion of information because it's a very objectified notion. It has to be, because in order to build these kinds of machines and to have them do what they do, we have to kind of, sort of rein in. We have to construct according to very precise sorts of mathematical models, the notion of information as it is used in order to have these machines do what they do. But they won't always work in the same way. And I think that, for example, you could imagine sort of wetware. We already have little cells or bits of DNA in test tubes that we've figured out how to, not me personally, but I've heard that this has been done, where they basically created a little system of, the analog to memory chips out of living or parts of living organic structures. So you can kind of maybe imagine sort of a future in which wetware takes over for silicon chips. And maybe along with it, you could imagine maybe intelligent type devices or machines that operate according to very, very different kinds of principles than current ones do. And I think at that point, one can also imagine that the way in which we conceive of what we now call information, or information as it is understood in AI, will also change. Just to be a little bit more specific, what I have in mind is a kind of a notion of information which isn't strictly focused on a kind of a reductionist notion of a system that has the components that are either switched on or off, and the patterns that are composed of that. That's not how we're understanding human perception to work. Human perception has been, once upon a time, it was very popular to model human perception on the basis of how computers worked. But we've sort of moving away from that, and activist approaches are modeling themselves on sort of on self-organizing biological systems rather than bits in an informational system. And it's a different way of thinking about knowing or what we call sense making in living systems. Living systems make sense in terms of interacting, in terms of their sensory motor participation in the world. They change the world talks back. It's a reciprocal process. And you can see already that that's different than this notion of information, which is sort of, very much embedded within, it's assigned to chips and things, and misses this whole notion of this reciprocal notion of causality. But yeah, I guess that was the point I wanted to make. And if Roland's still here, and he has maybe a couple seconds to to let me know if what he was thinking and whether he wanted to apply his digital analog thing to human perception or not.
Thank you very much, Josh. Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing next time as well. Keep on walking.
Yeah.
I have to be certain of that.
Do I dare respond, Ron?
Dominic, did you have your hand up? Did you put it down? Or
I did, Ron, but before I put you into a situation where you just press that magic button,
No.
I will not push your limits.
No. My limits are being pushed all the time. It's okay. it's only once a month, luckily.
Ah, okay.
The
All
first Sunday of the month.
Ah, okay. I have to memorize that in my storage. Yeah. Well, okay. No, I think just the notion of again map and territory. I also find it quite interesting, and I would say that, I mean, in sort of generating the map of the territory, I think it does not need to store the, every configuration that is possible. You know what I mean? Like, let's say I have a cup on my table, on my desk. Its internal configuration, its atoms, and so could be configured in many myriad kind of ways to form basically what then in the macrocosm looks like the exact same cup. So it would be, in a sense, sufficient to just store, in a sense, only a limited amount of configurations on the map to represent to represent the cup. So, but then maybe if the map is very, very detailed, it has all the information, it would be still somehow akin to the actual territory without storing all the possibilities in which the atoms of the cup could be configured. And to me, in that sense, then the map has also become the territory. I don't know. It's more in response to Roland there. I don't know if you would agree. Because you ended up with the claim that in principle the map cannot become the territory. And I would say in turn that, if the map had that would still possibly happen if not all possible configurations are stored, but sort of only those one of the many which can form, let's say, the one cup that you actually need. And then you still have a situation of map has become territory. You know what I mean? And the other thing is that if map becomes territory, then there is no map anymore, and then there's no problem. So you don't need to store the map and the territory in the same system. You just, map has become the territory, and the map is forgotten. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it works out in my head in terms of map territory.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very nice. Jyoti.
Just one quick observation. Everybody got me thinking about time and its link to certainty, and what came to mind was memory. So, which is also placed in time. So it's keeping track of events that have happened. Or maybe you choose, or you have a list of to-do things. I just want to speak about something in my personal experience. I have a history of epilepsy, and I've had many seizures, and I took a neuropsych exam, and the strangest result was that when somebody tells me a story or gives me some information and asks for immediate recall, my recall is kind of fuzzy, but 15 minutes down the road, my recall is very clear. So, like, you know, like which one is certain? It just kind of puts everything into subjective.
Yes.
Even, you know, even memory and the functioning of memory placed in time. I mean, I was just so baffled by that result. You would think that if you told me something, you know, right now, I would remember it better than I would 15 minutes later or half an hour later. But somehow the way the brain works, my particular brain works, I remember better half an hour down.
Obviously not. Yes, obviously not necessarily. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much, Jyoti. Hope to see you next time again.
Thank you so much, Ron, and everybody else. I was
Thank you
kind
very
of
much to everybody.
multitasking here and appreciate it.
I just have a quote I found about it's from Mencken. Said, moral certainty is always a sign of cultural inferiority. The more uncivilized the man, the surer he is that he knows precisely what is right and what is wrong. So I thought that was quite cute. And I wish you all a good night and whatever, good morning, good afternoon, whatever. And look forward to seeing you all again next month. Thank you very much for coming. And I look forward to seeing you again. Bye, everybody. Bye.